Jerusalem or whatever, it's like, oh, well, actually, with the legal definition, we don't really know. But yeah, so
I guess for
um,
me, when I think of like when I think of apartheid, I think of like this is a country that you fully control, that you are doling out rights to citizens for. The biggest complaints about apartheid for Israel have to do with militarily occupied territories. And like, no, in the history of all of mankind is anybody doling out like equal rights to people in militarily occupied territories. So it just seems like really weird. This is why like the argument that I go with everybody's like, okay, well, if we were to solve the border problem, do you think the apartheid would go away? Most likely it should, almost completely.
mhm.
But like, is apartheid ever going away under a military occupation? Almost certainly never. It never will. So it just seems like weird to address that as an apartheid thing. Whereas for the Arab states, like they intentionally and explicitly will maintain second-class citizenship for people in their country for an indefinite amount of time until the Israelis thing is solved, which just seems
Yeah, so
really
it's like
weird.
it's like conditions that are tantamount to apartheid rather than like actual apartheid. Because, but again, so I suppose if the intent is maybe different, so if there's like intention from the Israeli government to hold on to the West Bank,
Hmm.
then that probably becomes more apartheid-esque. Let's say if they annexed it, right? Would it, if they annexed West Bank, would you say it was apartheid?
I mean, if they annexed it and didn't give equal rights, yeah, of course.
Well,
And I
wait.
think the
Would you
strongest.
say would you say
What?
East Jerusalem is apartheid because that's annexed?
Did they formally annex East Jerusalem?
Yeah, well, like what's an
Like, is
informal
it part? Like,
annexation? It's
is it no longer
Knesset law,
part of
yeah.
like the military borders? Well, the Knesset was set up in West Jerusalem initially, right? Did they move it to East Jerusalem?
No, the Knesset like passed the it was passed through the Knesset to annex East Jerusalem, if that's what you mean by formal.
Oh, then I mean, are those people? Well, actually, wait. Haven't historically the Arab Palestinians in East Jerusalem been granted more rights than the Palestinians in other occupied territories? I could be wrong on that.
Well, they can get blue cards if they opt into it, and they have to go through a whole procedure, which the
Hmm.
Israelis who live there don't have to go through. But I
Sure.
think it's like 5% of Palestinians in East Jerusalem have Israeli citizenship, but most of them
Sure.
don't.
I mean,
Yeah.
if it's formally annexed into Israeli territory and there are different sets of rights being doled out to different people, in my opinion, that's apartheid. So if that is going on in the case of East Jerusalem, if this is formally annexed territory and Arab Palestinians living there don't have like a reasonable path to citizenship or reasonable path to anything that like any other citizen would have, then yeah, I would say these would be apartheid conditions for these people.
Okay.
So just backing up a little bit. So we're talking about that this is like a military occupation, so you can't compare it to apartheid. But this has been going on for so many decades. I mean, this is like when you have a situation where, like we talked about earlier, there are people who just have spent their entire life in this state, and it's not just that it's like military occupied, but the fact that they don't have freedom of movement within their own territories, the fact that actual Palestinian areas within the West Bank are becoming separated from each other and fenced apart
Hmm.
from each other because of the settlements, um, and the fact that Palestinians, I think, even within like the West Bank, need the Israeli land agency. I can't remember the name for it, but they need to be granted
Yeah,
permits.
they got building permits and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, from Israel to build houses like on their own land. I mean, yeah, I don't know why we're kind of splitting hairs with this, especially when like prominent South Africans and South Africans in general say like, yeah, this seems like apartheid.
I don't. I wouldn't care what other. A whole bunch of people around the world are gonna have different reasons for saying different things. Like I'm pretty sure the United States, like for instance, they refused to condemn Israel on that prior resolution for actions in the Gaza Strip or whatever. But like, does that mean that like everybody in the U.S. doesn't think something wrong is happening there, or is it like a political posturing for one reason or another? Like I agree that the situations in the West Bank, like every single thing matches apartheid.
Hmm.
Like I don't think anybody could disagree with that. It just seems weird to call it apartheid when the issue isn't apartheid. The issue is the military occupation. The border shit has to be solved. The apartheid shit will never be solved until the border shit is solved. So it feels weird to fixate on the apartheid part because that's not going away without the border stuff being solved. Yeah.
Oh, Lycan, I think you're muted.
A lot of people understand when you say apartheid. They understand what you're saying. Like like you said, the conditions check, 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 check. So saying it, I mean, guess quibbling over it isn't really meaningful. For all intents and purposes, these people live under apartheid conditions.
Yeah, but then it doesn't. It's a morally loaded term that people just use to say good or to feel
But
good about
Wait,
the
but
thing.
it's
It
it's
doesn't.
morally
the
loaded for a
moral
reason, which
implications,
is
yeah, the moral implications are applicable to these people.
yeah.
Yeah, but the moral implications aren't that. Like, we would be having a far different conversation if there was one state, if Israel annexed everything and Palestinians didn't have rights. like at that point, I don't know if anybody could support the country of Israel. That would be fucking insane. If they annexed both territories and Palestinians were treated as second-class citizens, we have like we do have apartheid 2.0, an international affair that needs to be dealt with. But right now, the issue isn't that; it's military borders. That's the huge issue, and that's what needs to be solved. Not the apartheid conditions. Those will be.
Well, how do you
fixed
communicate
once
that in a way that evokes the conditions they're under? Because the military occupation is illegal, the enforcement of the occupation is illegal, and they live under apartheid conditions. So when people hear apartheid, they hear the exact conditions these people are living in. Plus, there's some additional cherries on top that are pretty awful.
Yeah, but people now, everybody's just protesting against apartheid conditions. But we don't need to protest against apartheid conditions. We have to protest to get borders established. That's the important thing that needs to happen. The apartheid is never going away without the borders.
Is your problem that the problem with apartheid is that it just seems like a foot in the door for one state? Because the logical conclusion to apartheid is voting rights in one state.
Truly, it is. Yes, unfortunately, for a lot of people. But
so it's not about describing the conditions. That's not your problem. The problem is just that, like, the path it leads people down.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm good faith, I'm sure there are some people that talk about the apartheid thing that are legitimately just concerned about the status of the Palestinians living there. But again, that status is never going to be fixed by fixing apartheid. It's going to be fixed by establishing borders and a new country.
Well, the government isn't going to.
That's the only way to fix it.
Right, but if our governments and the United Nations and the EU and whoever else go in to try to fix the situation, they're not going to be like, well, we kept hearing apartheid from the people, so that's really what we're going to focus on. They're going to go in and actually address the issues. That's why we have representative governments, right?
I mean, are they? Is that happening right now? It doesn't seem like.
I mean, not yet, not at the moment. But I'm just saying that we're not muddying the water so much, saying apartheid, that it's going to halt the peace process and some resolution
but I think
is going to happen.
When the issue gets muddied, though, the political pressure doesn't exist to resolve the issue, right? Like if there was mounting political pressure on the world for like a two-state solution, that would be something that would start to become reflected in our leaders. Right now, there's just mounting pressure for something that will never happen, which is an ending of the apartheid. That doesn't mean anything. There's nothing's going to happen there. So there's pressure, but it's just anger. It doesn't do anything. It's like BLM. Like what changed from BLM? Nothing. What changed from Occupy Wall Street? Nothing, right? Like it's just a bunch of pressure, and then people get mad, and eventually they forget, and we move on.
So I don't think that's accurate, because those apartheid conditions they have the effect of radicalizing Palestinians, removing trust in some kind of process. Those are issues that impact the lives of Palestinians, and those are currently illegal. So when we're talking about like somebody coming to the table doing the right thing, shouldn't the U.S. be pushing Israel to do the right thing, at least? So we agreed that the settlements are a really huge issue, that they're illegal, that they should stop. The settlements are a big part of the apartheid, because those are the people who are pushing really far out and then having these fences built around them that then are further segregating the Palestinian areas. So I don't know why we wouldn't say that, okay, maybe we can't negotiate with Hamas, but surely we can negotiate with Israel, get them to start doing the right thing. That pushes things at least in the right direction. That's a thing that we can do today, right?
I guess I feel like there are such simple, powerful arguments, and the apartheid stuff muddies everything so much. Like, you need to stop building settlements in the West Bank because it's furthering a two-tier citizen system where Israelis that are moving into the West Bank are given more rights than Palestinian people in the West Bank. Like, that's an argument, but I feel like it's convoluted. I feel like the much clearer argument is like, you can't build settlements in militarily occupied territories. That's fucking unhinged. That's insane. I feel like that's incredibly simple. I think that's a rule that you could craft for the entire world.
Sure.
And it's just like so obviously true that if you're military occupying a place, you can't build homes there and move in citizens of your country. It's like Russification or whatever, essentially. That's wild. And I feel like it's such a simple argument. It's easy to understand. We don't have to talk about any apartheid shit. We don't have to talk about equalization of rights. You just can't build houses in places you military occupy.
So then would you revise what you were saying, that it's like the Palestinians have to have like 5 years of peace and then maybe we can see where we go? Would you revise that to say like Israel has to stop building these settlements today, or there's no reason to think things will move forward?
I mean, I think Israel should stop building settlements. I think that we should pressure them to stop building settlements. I just don't know if they will. And I don't know if like they have the desire to. I don't know if they feel like they benefit from it. But I think that's like one area where the U.S. I think a lot of our past presidents have. I think Bush, I think Obama. I don't know if Biden has mentioned anything about settlements, but like, yeah, I think that like pressuring Israel to at the very least stop building fucking new settlements or expanding on them would be a good idea. So I think that's true.
So what would pressure look like?
Withholding funds, like Bush Senior froze like a $10 billion fund in exchange for a settlement freeze. before
Something like
Madrid. Yeah.
boycotting, perhaps I think divesting, and maybe sanctions.
well,
I think those
I
are
mean, actually, even because the region is so small, like boycotts are pretty. Like I think even Jordan Valley settlements got really fucked over by a boycott campaign like a few years ago. So yeah,
Or a federal lift, okay? I still have not heard a good argument for this, okay? Stop the settlements, or we lift or make it federally illegal to do all that anti-BDS shit. That's fucking wild.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that would be a really good pressure.
That's why the anti-BDS laws exist, is because they know that there is a huge power. My understanding is that BDS had a huge impact on two major issues: apartheid in South Africa, and there's one other I can't remember. But you have 38 states in the union where it's illegal for you to, speak against Israel and talk about BDS. So
Wait, hold
totally
on.
insane.
That's not true. It's not illegal to speak about it. I just think if you're a company that does business in the state, you can't engage in it, right?
what's her name? Abby Martin, I think, was going to give a speech in Georgia, and they wanted her to sign a contract that said that she would not talk about any BDS stuff or anti-Israel stuff, and she took it to court and won. I don't know if it went to the Supreme Court of Georgia for it or
Sure,
what.
that's fine, but I'm saying like a contract from a private company. That's something different than like, it's
I think-
illegal to speak out against Israel. You absolutely can speak out.
Okay, hold on.
But
Let
the
me
BDS yeah, go
let me verify.
Okay. I know. I just know. This would be the biggest First Amendment violation in the history of the entire United States. We couldn't speak
Yeah,
out
it's
against
pretty
another country.
crazy.
Well, that would be crazy, but there's no way that's the case.
what were we supposed to be talking about?
Your mom.
Well, I came in. So I had wanted to talk to, public servants, not just private entities as well.
Yeah, I think there was something about like school teachers. Where,
Yeah,
like,
school teachers in Texas, I know for sure, are not allowed to.
yeah. Which sounds made up because it's so radical
Insane.
to say.
First
yeah.
Amendment violating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we did this for a lot of things in the past, right? Yeah, because even like all those Birmingham bus boycotts and shit were like insanely illegal, like organized boycotts.
Yeah, and it's fucking horrible. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the idea that there's a country we can't talk negatively about and talk about sanctioning and holding accountable. I don't know of another country that has that status in codified in U.S. state law. But I came in. I'd wanted to talk to Stephen because I know he's got a debate coming up with Shapiro. And Stephen, when you were going through that debate of his, there were some points you were like jotting down and whatnot. And so I figured that some of the stuff that I've been researching might be useful. And it kind of coincided with what you and Socrates left off. So you were saying, Stephen, that the IDF, has that policy of deterrence where they scare the shit out of everyone in the region and no one wants to fuck with them. And that's something that's actually pretty well documented and codified in both Israeli policy and in their actions. When it came up to Kasled, they were very explicit. Military leaders government officials were very explicit. Like, this operation is to, show the world what's what. They were very butthurt after the 2006 Lebanon war. They were concerned that, because of that situation, they were not looking great. Hamas was becoming more legitimized as a governmental figure in Gaza. And because of all that, the legitimacy of Hamas, the unrest growing with a prolonged ceasefire, they wanted to restore their deterrence capacity. And so they broke the ceasefire. And that's what led to Operation Cast Lead. So, I mean, it's a policy that's been used to justify a handful of massacres, at least between 2008 and 2014.
Yeah, I mean that's been Israel fighting policy since their foundation, I think. So
Yeah, but it's not surprising, but it's it's not good. I mean, they've got the Dahiyya doctrine, which was developed during the war in Lebanon, which was basically and explicitly, and if we have to do the source game, I'll provide them. The military leaders came out and said, yeah, we learned that if we can't fight the ground army or we don't want to engage directly with them, we'll just go ahead and do as much destruction to civilian areas as we can, which is one, a war crime, two,
Wait, I would be curious in seeing that document.
I will absolutely provide that. Now, do you
I
want it
do
now, or do
agree
you want
that
to
I
just
think
keep
it's
going the
maybe not-
conversation?
Well, yeah, search for it, I guess, whichever. But I do agree that I do agree that it's bad to do that. But when we say bad, I mean, actually, when you say bad, what do you mean when you say bad?
I mean, bad in a
Can
few
talk
ways. Morally, disproportionate force used against civilians to force the government or turn the civilians against the people. A, being a war crime. B, being wanton bloodshed. Yeah, I mean, those are the two primary points when I say bad.
I think that the problem that Israel has found itself facing time and time again is Israel feels like the only way it can legitimize itself in the eyes of its neighbors is through like extreme military force. And it seems to be the case that empirically that has been borne out time and time and time and time and time again. It was only through conquering the Sinai that Egypt finally came to the table and was willing to negotiate a peace deal with them. It was only through like supreme military dominance that Jordan was willing to come to the table and negotiate something. It was with the withdrawal and the loss in Lebanon, the military weakness, that Hamas and the Palestinians were more emboldened to fight against Israel. So it seems like every time Israel shows itself to be some sort of military might, it commands the respect of the nations around it and it starts to negotiate towards peace. And every time they appear weak, they just get attacked and everything is fucked and they feel like they can't negotiate peace. Not to say it's like morally good or morally bad, but I think that's like the Israeli mentality is the only way that we can basically establish our right to exist here is through extreme military conquest.
But the issue is that that's a misconception, or I guess an ahistorical reading, is that like it's constantly said Palestinians are the impediment to peace, where on multiple occasions Israel has fomented the conflict and intentionally disrupted the peace process. Again, leading up
Like
to
how do we mean that with like in
so
what way?
Cast lead. They broke the ceasefire. They did a raid over Gaza borders on tunnels, killing 6 or 8.
Wait,
Hamas,
Kassab was in what year?
2008
2008.
to 2009.
2008?
Yep. So there was a ceasefire. Hamas was not only enforcing the ceasefire, but was coming down on other groups that were being militant against Israel. And Israel came out and said this tunnel may have been used to abduct soldiers, so we attacked it. Well, they broke the cease.
Real quick,
ahead.
because I don't know anything about Cast-Led. Okay, I haven't
Yep,
read
absolutely.
anything about this. If I go and I start to read on Cast-Led, am I going to find a whole bunch of inciting incidents leading to Israel destroying these tunnels, or is it just going to be them literally coming out of nowhere, breaking a ceasefire, and blowing shit up?
It's going to be them coming out of nowhere, breaking a ceasefire.
They said
They
it
were-
was they said it was preempted because there was a plan to abduct soldiers. I think wasn't that right?
I don't know if any evidence was provided or any strong statement that we knew for a fact this was going to happen. I believe their exact language was that could have been used.
Wait, hold on one second.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess they. So I think they thought the tunnels were going to be used to get over the border to abduct soldiers.
Right. And then
And
they
then,
could do
yeah.
what they did and not break the ceasefire. They could have blown up the tunnels on the inside of Israel, and that's what Egypt did. And there were not as many, that my understanding, anywhere near as many going into Israel as there were going into Egypt. There were thousands, I think, in Egypt, and they just bombed them on their side, and that was it. They did no destruction in Gaza. They broke no boundaries, no borders.
Did Israel also say that there was like a Hamas military buildup?
Hamas is allowed to build up a military. And just, I want to say this again when Steven gets here, but something we have to be really understanding of is there's a difference between defending Hamas and their bad actions and really understanding the enemy and the situation surrounding all these events. So at the end of the day, we can't just say, well, Hamas is the government and blame them for everything bad that happens, but then also at the same time say they don't have a right to build up a military or a defense.
Okay.
And to take it to the next logical conclusion, do they have a right to attack Israel? I mean, under international law, it's been ruled, yes, they do. It has also been ruled that it is a war crime for them to use those missiles they use because they are not accurate projectiles and they.
Well, that's what I was going to ask
hit
you is
civilian areas.
can Hamas actually attack Israel in a way that's legal? Yeah, I don't
Nope.
think they can.
I mean, but that's one of the hard pills to swallow, right? Is to acknowledge, no, they can't attack Israel in a way that's, legal and whatnot. But at the same time, they're a very destitute country without any kind of significant military capabilities. So it's either we tell them you can't do anything or you do something. So I'll say, Stephen, since you're back,
Hi, what's up?
as we're going into this, one of the hard things is that, you can't just say Hamas is a terrorist organization. They're not allowed to do anything militarily, while at the same time saying they're the government and they're responsible for this and the other. They are responsible for Palestinian defense in Gaza. They ultimately are. So they are allowed to build up a military. They are allowed to.
Well, hold on. There's a difference between internal defense, which I believe was supposed to be relegated to the PA or the PNA, Palestinian National Authority, after the Oslo Accords. There's a difference between internal defense versus Hamas explicitly has the militant arm of their organization. Fuck, what I don't remember what it's called, but like that's explicitly just for like terror attacks into Israel. It's not just defense of the Palestinian people. Technically, my understanding is Palestinian people shouldn't have to provide defense for themselves because Israel will be taking care of that. Like if somebody were to try to invade like Palestine or Israel would be the one to respond to
No,
that
because
invasion.
Israel is still it's disputed, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, Israel still technically occupies. Just because you redeploy to the other side of the perimeter doesn't mean you've stopped your military occupation. And at the end of the day, when they do things like the illegal operations like cast lead and protective edge, they're allowed to defend themselves. Hamas is allowed to fight Israel. And everyone said after 10/7, it's like if they had just attacked troops, that'd be one thing, but they attacked civilians. Well, we're talking about engaging with the IDF now. We're not talking about civilians. Israel bombing after, I think it was Pillar of Defense. Israel bombed, something like 33, 38 different tunnels. Only 13 of them were on the Israeli side. The rest were inside of Gaza. And the reason they did that is because those tunnels allowed for the first time there to be some significant in comparison to previous operations, number of IDF casualties. They lost 66 people. Again, that is, they are allowed to build those defensive structures. They are allowed to fight
Well,
back.
technically, they're. I mean, when we say allowed to, I'm pretty sure part of what Israel has negotiated is they're not allowed to build their own defenses, right? I think under the Oslo Accords, they weren't going to have their own like standing military. They could only do internal security.
I mean, we can go back to the Oslo Accords and talk about, the 10 million cubic liters of water that Israel was supposed to provide and never did. Like there various,
Well, the entirety of the Oslo Accords, I don't believe were carried out into the end, right? I think that was the process was getting frustrated, but I mean, like the process had started, right?
Right. But so talking about cast lead, right? So Israel foments the conflict. They do a raid, they break the ceasefire, and then Hamas, sends rockets over. Like something important to remember is that there have been 44 deaths since 2003 to Hamas rockets. There have been at least up to 2014, I think it was 1,500 injuries. I don't know what the injury rate is now. I know that something like 3,500 rockets have been launched since 10/7. So I think we might be getting close to 30,000 rockets. But you got to think.
What is I don't understand the point of that. Like, what other country in the world lives next to another country that's just continually firing rockets into it and does nothing or very little about it? Like, I don't know if like the numbers of deaths on both sides is like a thing that.
I think, well, no, not just by itself, right? Number of deaths, but you got to look at the retaliatory effect, and you have to look at the disproportionate force used against Hamas and the people of Gaza, in particular the people of Gaza. You want to attack military people, I don't give a shit about that. You want to attack Gazans, though, after cast lead, Israel was found to have committed war crimes, disproportionate force, disregard for civilians, intentionally targeting civilians.
So on that note, Destiny, I sent you an article about killing a Palestinian American journalist. So this was like snipers targeting her, and they did an actual study, and they could determine that they actually could see that she was a journalist before they shot her, and then they were like shooting all around her so that nobody could drag her away. And so I think there have been other cases where Israel has been targeting journalists. And so people talk a lot about the kind of fog of war around the conflicts. We don't know exactly what's going on or like how many people are dying in what situations. I think Israel has some responsibility when they target journalists to make that situation more unclear.
Also, Israel is the occupying force, illegal occupation, and they are not under international law. They are not allowed to use violent force to enforce that occupation, and the people of Palestine, including Hamas, are under international law allowed to resist the occupation with violence.
That is not true.
It is true.
Like targeting civilians or whatever is not
targeting
true.
civilians.
No, I didn't say targeting
but...
civilians. I just said resisting. Yeah. So targeting civilians, no. So something that was said before you got here is one of the issues is that Palestine or Hamas, doesn't have the ability to get high, high accuracy weapons, right? and it has been ruled a war crime that they use these inaccurate weapons against Israel. But the tough pill to swallow is whether or not we say, okay, well, I guess you can't do anything to resist, or, you know, you get to use those rockets. And, you know, people have, when you look at the, I guess the, what's it called, the ability for those rockets, again, we're nearing 30,000 rockets. That's the point where you look at it and you say, okay, well, to what degree is this actually doing anything? You know, you guys were talking about Finkelstein earlier. I think he's the one who coined the term, you know, glorified fireworks or bottle rockets or something like that. And even Israeli officials have mocked them and said they're basically rods. You know, like the farthest ones that have hit deeper into Israel have literally just been rods with the explosives removed just for, you know, whatever kind of show of force it is. So, I mean, either way, these rocket attacks that do little to no significant harm to Israel are always met with disproportionate force.
Well, I mean, not always, right? But also the like it is expensive to intercept all of these, right? It is a thing that you have got to deal with constantly.
It is, but one of the lead, I can't remember what his role was, from MIT, who was a huge proponent of the Iron Dome and a huge champion of it, later came around and said, you know, we have little evidence to actually show that this is doing any significant change. Look at 2003 to 2000 and look at 2003 to 2010, you know, casualties and damage and all that stuff versus 2011 to now, or at least 2011 to 2014, which is the area I've read the most on. There hasn't been like a significant reduction. Again, I think it was like 23 deaths up to 2014, and now we're only at 44. So when that's being met with invasions like Cast Lead and Protective Edge, where I think 14,000 people died, 500 of which were
Wait. An operation.
Cast Lead. 14,000 people died.
I see the total deaths look like they're less than 1,500. Just as a quick, unless I'm missing something. It's 1,166 to
I don't think it was.
1,417.
Yeah.
But
I don't know where.
I didn't know this whole conversation about Cast Lead, so I'm reading a.
Well, no, it's not. What I really wanted to do was just.
Sorry,
like
Lycan, there was one thing I
level.
wanted to ask you about. You said in Cast Lead they deliberately targeted civilians.
Yep.
I hear that claim a lot. Can you show me that?
Sure.
Like, how does that work? Like, they were actually given coordinates, like, to go and like go strike this fucking house that has
So
no
there
Hamas.
was one where soldiers had told a family to all congregate in this house. I think there were like 100 members of the family there. They were all within sight of the soldiers, and they had been there for some significant time, and then they ended up, you know, some people went out to gather firewood, and they ended up, you know, killing 23 members of the family. And this was investigated by independent bodies, and it was reported in the Goldstone report. And before any pushback to the Goldstone report, Goldstone's retraction was only from him, not the other three authors of the report. And it was not substantiated with any evidence. If anything, at the time, more evidence had come to light that had further proven what was found in the Goldstone report.
Just a note about Cast Lead. The other kind of increase in civilian casualties was targeting ambulances and medical crews. So preventing people who were injured from getting medical attention who then died. I don't know if there's a good place to like put links.
Oh, hold up. I'm so sorry. 1 second. And I could be wrong here. Did Operation Cast Lead violate a ceasefire?
Yes.
Or did the ceasefire end and then Cast Lead began?
No, Cast Lead violated the ceasefire.
Are you sure?
Not Cast Lead, sorry. Cast Lead ended the ceasefire, and then the operation took place. That's what I said at the very beginning.
Okay, I'm just reading a congressional,
Israel,
because I haven't read it. So prior to the start of Israel's campaign, experts warned that a full-scale resumption of Israeli-Palestinian violence was imminent as Egyptian mediation failed to extend the 6-month ceasefire that expired on December 19th, 2008. So when did Cast Lead begin?
I think
The 27th of December 2008. So it sounds like
they violated something. They violated the ceasefire before Cast Lead.
Okay.
Israel
what was the
bombs
violation prior to
Israel.
But that means that Cast Lead wasn't the violation of the ceasefire.
No, Cast Lead wasn't the violation. So Israel violates the ceasefire by bombing the tunnels on the side of Gaza, killing Hamas people. over there. Then Hamas responds with rocket attacks afterwards. And then Israel uses that as a pretense to invade for Cast Lead.
4th. Oh, wait, hold on. Okay. So a 6-month long between ended on November 4th when the IDF made a raid into Deir al-Balah. This is what you're talking about, right?
And Cast Lead was on November 4th.
No. Cast Lead was on, I think, the 27th of December. The raid that you're... Or no.
No, I think that's right, isn't it?
So the November 4th raid.
They started Cast Light on 27th of December, but the
Yes.
raid was on the 4th of November, yeah.
Yeah.
We're all reading the same Wikipedia.
I'm
Also-
because
what
when
was
I've-
the,
when I-
what was, or go ahead.
Because when I read the ICRC case on the targeting of civilians, like it just seemed that they were basically saying that Israel was consistent in targeting and pursuing legitimate military targets, and that was from the International Committee of the Red Cross, who work along with the ICC. So I don't know. I feel like it's all inference when people say that they targeted civilians, unless there's actually anything more concrete. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'll get you a few sources.
Okay.
As far as the casualty point that I was going to make, so numbers between 1,166 to 1,147, 255 of those were police officers for Gaza. The other, let's see what it is. The rest were Hamas. I think it was 236, according to the Wikipedia article. But as far as civilian casualties, they significantly, outnumber combatant casualties. And that happens because of the way that Israel, chooses to go through. So again, the Goldstone
Oh,
report
wait.
comes
Does
out.
it happen because of how Israel chooses to go through, or is it because of how
Yes.
Hamas positions itself among the civilian population?
No. So Israel, first of all, two things. One, with regard to human shield definition and with regard to, embedding in civilian areas, both are illegal. One is a war crime. One is a human rights violation. Those are significant differences.
Sure,
So,
but Hamas does both of those, right?
so as far as, and I will only speak to the period between 2008 and 2014, between those periods, only Israel by international human rights organizations and the United Nations were found to have used actual human shields, which is the conscription of an individual to prevent attacking on a position.
That definition of human shield, I don't know where that comes from. I've never seen that anywhere.
I think-
That's not
No,
the
it's
ICC
a-
definition. It's not the ICRC definition. I've never seen that particular. I know Finkelstein has used it before, but I've never seen that definition of human shield given anywhere.
I think that's
I
the
have.
official definition. I think the colloquial one is like having
No.
operations near
People
civilians.
around. Yeah.
No, the official one that's listed on the IC RH website and everything to do with human shields. The official definition, given in international law, is the stationing of like ammunition and stuff near definition of human shields. A prohibition of using human shields in the Geneva Convention, Statute of International Criminal Court, are couched in terms of using the presence or movements of civilians or other protected persons to render certain points or areas or military forces immune from military operations. Most examples given in military manuals, blah, 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 have been cases where persons are actually taken to military objectives in order to shield those objectives from attacks. But it can be concluded that the use of human shields requires an intentional co-location of military objectives and civilians or persons hors de combat with the specific intent of trying to prevent the targeting of those military objectives. These are all of the international regulations. That particular, I'm so curious you have a source that I've heard Finkelstein give that definition of human shield. I haven't seen that written in international law anywhere, that conscripting civilians is the definition of a human shield. I haven't even seen the conscripting civilians one, although I'm sure it's probably part of this somewhere, but...
Give me a second.
Yeah, I know the situations where the IDF has taken actual like Palestinian civilians and held them like directly in front of them. I don't know.
Oh yeah, so I mean, the important point, the important endpoint is that just because Hamas does those things, which again, like people fighting with me on this in chat are acting like I'm saying, well, Hamas did nothing wrong, and I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is just because you set up in a school, in a hospital, whatever, you don't get carte blanche to then target it. It has to be first, the threat has to be evaluated, whether they're shooting at you, whether it's rockets going into Israel, whether it's people shooting at troops. The threat has to be matched against the reaction. So you can't just blow it up, and it has to be proportional, and it has to be with the intent to minimize civilian casualties as much as possible.
Yeah, but my understanding is when you step outside of just like Amnesty International, I believe that most of the military experts that I've read that evaluate these situations say that Israel more or less does this with basically all of their targeting.
The United Nations completely disagreed.
Yeah,
They're deep,
I haven't
thorough
seen that at all.
evaluation.
I'm saying outside of like UN and like Amnesty International, when I see like military people or people that do like international law talk about this, I'm curious for the UN, is there like a particular statement from the UN saying Israel is intentionally targeting civilians, or is it always just like a general condemnation of civilian death under the occupation?
1 second.
So I've seen, I think even to like B'Tselem, they've talked about it's not necessarily intentionally targeting civilians, but it's like, hey, we think there's one Hamas guy here. We're going to blow up this whole apartment complex. It's that kind of thing.
Well, I'm just curious, like, why do you, like, I guess, I don't know if hand wave is the right word, you tell me what your intent is, but like when I bring up, that it's the UN and international, human rights organizations and international law that cites these things as such. Like,
I'm curious if the UN actually has said that like Israel is indiscriminately targeting civilians, or if it's just broad resolutions like condemning the violence. I don't know if I've seen I know there have been like individual instances, I think, where there have been certain condemnations of like an IDF soldier killing somebody, but in terms of just like broadly during military conflict, just broadly and intentionally killing civilians.
Well, I mean, indiscriminate bombing, like, has
Yeah,
that
but
effect.
Israel clearly
We
doesn't
know
engage in
it's
indiscriminate bombing, right?
They do indiscriminate bombing. Yes.
Where? What? And
So
when?
first of all, okay, so one, you push back on the population density of Gaza, but Gaza City, which is receiving most of the shelling, is 42,000 people per square mile in that city. That is hugely dense, and it doesn't matter if it ranks if it ranks 62nd in the world.
Well,
That's
then why
still
does Hamas shoot rockets out of Gaza City? Why not go to the outside of the city?
because it's within range of the enemy. But again, IDF. So again, like, look at the damage being caused by those rockets, the deaths being caused by those rockets. That has to be evaluated against how Israel hits their targets when they want to, disarm the threat of Hamas rockets.
So as long as they can continue to intercept the rockets from the Iron Dome, they have no right to.
No, I didn't
Hamas
say that.
independence on?
I didn't say that.
Okay,
I
I
said
don't know how
that
that's like
as long as they proportionally respond. So that means not leveling multiple city blocks, not displacing thousands of people, not killing thousands of innocent civilians. They can attack Hamas.
What does a proportional response look like?
A proportional response would be a ground invasion. A
Hold
proportional,
on. What do you think a ground invasion would be less deaths?
less deaths for civilians? Yeah, absolutely. We are at 10,800 as of, I think, yesterday, as far as deaths go. Most of those are civilians.
Well,
A
probably
155 millimeter mortar shell has a 50-meter kill range and a 150-meter casualty range.
well, sure, but like let's say if
Well, hold on. The danger close for 155 millimeter launched by an M109, which is what the howitzer that the Israeli army uses, has a danger close radius of 750 meters. That is where you account for the inaccuracy where that fucking shell can land anywhere else. Like, these are projectiles that cause significant devastation. By the 12th of October, they had launched 4,000 tons of munitions into Gaza City.
okay, wait.
So it is hard to say.
Wait, real quick. So if a ground invasion happens, okay, so Hamas, or for whatever reason, Palestinians already aren't evacuating, right? Even though they've been given ample time to do so, right? So if they're not evacuating, and then a ground invasion happens, why would we think that the loss of life, would be significantly less?
Because they're not using munitions that are going to cause significant blasts and devastation. It's been proven out by the ground invasions. Look at Cast Lead, look at Pillar of Defense, look at
Was Cast Lead or
Protective
Pillar
Edge.
of Defense this level of invasion? Where they were moving through the
Protective,
entirety of Gaza? Or
Protective Edge and Cast Lead were, yeah. And in Cast Lead, they lost a handful of IDF soldiers.
Yeah, I've heard this point over and over again that a ground offensive would have way more civilian casualties, but I've never seen that substantiated, or I'm not sure what
And
people
even-
are looking at when they're saying that.
And even the one time they did take significant was 66. One of the problems is for the government in Israel, any sizable number, and sizable meaning in the tens, multiple tens of casualties, is untenable to the Israeli people. Whereas, again, Hamas numbers are always significantly more deaths. Israeli deaths are always significantly less. Civilian casualties in comparison to air attacks versus ground attacks are significantly less when they go in on the ground. They're still disproportionate. They're still bad numbers. But yeah, it's not a significantly more dangerous thing. And it's been proven out time and time again with their ground invasions.
Just to double check, I'm pretty sure this ground invasion is a lot more intense and full on than Cast Load or Protective Edge. No,
It probably will be, but at the end of the day, at the
no, it
cost
already
of
is. But
at the cost of thousands and thousands of civilians, yeah, I think it's worth it. That's the point of the military. Like, we bomb military targets during a conventional war against a conventional enemy. We will bomb military targets before we go in to disable as many weapons, weapon stores, et cetera, as we can. And then we put the ground army in because it's safer for them, right? In this case, Israel does target where they believe there are known weapons caches, and then they go in. They've done it in previous operations. So they moved to the ground invasion. After
Didn't
getting
you
key
say that in
military
like
targets.
Cast Lead though that they were like literally killing civilians intentionally still? So why would you think that that would have less civilian deaths than?
Well, it's still
Because
fewer.
because it's the weaponry being used. Yeah, it's like read those documents that I was listening to you last night, listen to Finkelstein, but read the reports from the people that were actually on the ground that talk about it. Like you said, only one person in there was remorseful. Everyone else was talking matter of fact. The policy is, shoot first, ask questions later.
I don't think that's true. I feel like the casualties would be way, 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 way higher if that was
No,
the case.
because that's the misconception is that same thing with the, disproportionate force or the indiscriminate bombing. People think that it's going to be 100,000 dead. No, it's just, a significant more than needed to have died.
Well, but it would be like 100,000 dead, right?
No.
It wouldn't be just one city block level. It would be block after block after block.
44% of, and this was as of a week ago, 44% of structures in, I don't know if it's in Gaza City or all of North Gaza, have either been destroyed or critically damaged.
Yeah.
Civilian infrastructure
When we
is
say
protected under international law.
Well, no, it's not when it's being used to house military devices, number one. But number two, 44%. So shouldn't I have videos of or pictures of the entire...
Wait, hold on. 44%. 44%, you're going to say 44% were being used to house military devices and attacking.
No, I was just pushing back on your claim that civilian infrastructure can't be targeted under international law. And I'm pretty sure international law, when civilian infrastructure starts housing munitions, it's no longer considered civilian infrastructure under international law.
I don't think that's true.
I'm 100% positive it's true. We looked at
it is true. Again, from the law of armed conflict and the ICRC, it's the loss of absolute protection for civilian sites when it is misused by the adversary as a locus for military operations is broadly recognized in the law of armed conflict. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I guess so I think that would come down to what we consider Hamas, whether we consider all of Gaza
Well, no. It's about them specifically storing munitions and weapons and stuff and rockets in these places. It's not just we think that civilians.
Right, but when we did raids in...
But also, wait, just real quick on that one thing you just said. 40. So there are pictures and videos of 44%. Shouldn't I have
This was an AP report.
Yeah, I don't think that's contentious.
What, don't I?
Again,
why are there so many pictures of half the city leveled?
You can
I'm
find
so
some
curious.
photos of that.
44% of Gaza City critically damaged.
So from NPR from 3 days ago, I'm seeing between 13 to 18% of structures have been destroyed or damaged.
Also, destroyed or damaged there. Damage meaning... that hospital was probably damaged with the rocket that fell in the parking lot or whatever, but...
This is according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, 25% of Gaza's residential buildings, more than 100,000 housing units have been destroyed since October 7th. This is as...
Gosh, all right.
This is as of
That's
weeks
fine.
ago, though.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, the 44% of those sounds, that would be wild. That would be half the city is actually destroyed. I feel like there would be tons of pictures or videos if it was that.
I think damaged. I don't know if they've all been leveled, but they've been hit.
No, yeah, it was damaged or destroyed.
Okay.
So I'm just sending over from 2004. This is Betselem talking about.
Yeah, you can put it in the group chat so we can all see it.
Okay. Yeah. And then I'm wondering if you've gone over this yet. Just the quote from the IDF spokesman, who said that the emphasis is on damage, not accuracy. Now that they've shifted, I
would need to see the full quote. I would have to see the full quote on that.
So so that goes back to what I was bringing up at the beginning. The Dahia doctrine is, Israel has said leading up to, or I think as they were going into Kaslet, they hearkened back to Dahia in Lebanon and said, we're not. we're not going to attack Hamas. We're going to attack the people. We're going to attack the.
Well, I need to see that. I need to see that. I need to see that. Yeah.
Give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna grab my. Oh wait, no, I have my laptop here. Give me 1 second.
Also, this Bet Selim thing you linked me. This is from 2004.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What was this article supposed to say to me as well?
The Bet Selim?
Yeah. What point were you trying to make with this?
So they were saying that. So this is you were talking about that this is just like the UN and Human Rights Watch that were saying that there was disproportionate force. This is from Bet Selim, which is within Israel.
Well, I don't think I said disproportionate force. We agree with that. We all agree there's disproportionate force. It was about the intentional killing of civilians. It seems like Bet Selim, I believe. Yeah. Bet Selim was made. Was it in the 80s or 90s in Israel to hold Israel more accountable for the treatment of Palestinians, right? Hold on, I might have gotten. Okay, yeah, 1988. Yes,
yeah,
I believe it was explicitly created for this. Yes. Yeah. So their point is always going to be a little bit more in that direction, which is fine. I think that's totally fine. I'm not saying they're fake or they make anything up, but just in terms of reading what you sent me, the death of a large number of civilians who did not take part in the fighting, as well as the enormous property damage, strongly suggest that the IDF used disproportionate and illegal force. The lack of intention to kill civilians does not absolve the IDF commanders from their obligation to prevent gunfire, even when directed at armed individuals, if such fire is liable to result in disproportionate harm to civilians. Yeah. So just to be clear, this thing is not saying that there was like an intentional killing of civilians. No. It doesn't even make the exact claim that there was disproportionate or illegal force.
It's saying
just that the enormous amount of property damage. Just to say, not to say that it wasn't. Not to say that but just as to be clear.
Which
what this
I think shows that it's a pretty measured response. I think that's fair. Sure. I put the quote from it might be paywalled. I can send a anti-paywall link.
The Da'iya strategy.
Oh, here's an anti-paywall link.
What was your
Oh wait, does this mean this was published in 2008? That's what this means, right? Am I reading? Okay, I think it is. Yeah, the 10th of June 2008. Okay.
What was your summary of this doctrine, Lycan, the Dahiya?
That they will use disproportionate force against civilian infrastructure in order to do damage to either the government's credibility or to get the military to cease action.
Say that one more time.
Is this
from
like
destruction of
gotcha,
civilian?
or...
No. Just lost you because I got fucking ADHD. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Destruction of civilian infrastructure or and to cause damage to the populace.
Okay. And this is okay. Why did they do that?
They do it because, well, they did it in Lebanon because they didn't want to engage the Lebanese army in a ground invasion.
That's just to be clear. What you've linked me is not the justification given.
Yeah.
The justification given to what you've linked me is that basically the entirety of Lebanon has committed itself to the destruction of Israel, and Israel has failed time and time again to differentiate between the good and the bad, and the only thing that's happened is a growing militant faction. Hezbollah is growing in Lebanon, and now the need for more aggressive strategy basically is what is taking
That's
place.
not a justification for using an illegal strategy.
I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that the strategy again,
right,
here,
but I mean,
it's like we're going to start killing civilians.
The ultimate point of us having this conversation isn't to, like, I guess, quibble over the minutiae of international law. It's to make a value statement on Israel's policies and whether or not they're employing them again in the current conflict.
Sure, I understand that, but like we have to be honest with what we're citing for everything here, instead of just citing like one side, like, oh, Dalia is just Israel saying they want to kill civilians because they're tired of losing soldiers. That's not what this, and this is what you've linked me to describe this. So I imagine this.
I am, but then I can also link the statements from the officials who coined the term, who enforce the policy, and say this is why we enact this. So give me a minute.
Regrettably, the doctrine did not take hold in the days following our withdrawal from Lebanon. Too bad it did not take hold immediately after the disengagement from Gaza and the first rocket barrages directed at the northern Negev. In both those cases, we deluded ourselves into thinking that the people are not the same as their leaders and that the people only care about making a living, but are captive to radical and irresponsible elements. Had we immediately adopted the Da'iya strategy, we would have likely spared ourselves much trouble. Implementing the Da'iya strategy in Gaza would have made it clear to Hamas that we do not intend to hit them proportionally. And then earlier they talk about in Lebanon that thus far the Da'iya strategy was not adopted because Israel attempted to cling to the distinction between good Lebanese and bad Lebanese. If we only hit the bad guys, we thought the good guys will grow stronger. But there we have it. The bad guys took over our neighboring country. Now the whole of Lebanon is an Iranian outpost. Demography, military power, confidence, and social infrastructure, the fighting spirit, and outside support are in favor of Nasrallah. This is both good and bad. It's bad because north of us, there is a state that is entirely malicious. It's good because there's no longer any need for complicated distinctions. Israeli strategists' new point of view is that Lebanon is an enemy rather than a complex puzzle of factions, some of which are enemies while the others are victims of a situation not under their control. The Da'iya strategy is the customary doctrine adopted by most Arabs. In their view, Zionists are criminals, yet all of Israel's citizens are Zionists, including Jews who do not at all endorse Zionism. Only Arab propagandists educated in the West make the distinction between the Zionist government and the Jewish people, with which we have no historical conflict and were able to live in harmony for hundreds of years. I do not propose that we adopt the Arab way of thinking, but rather only the conclusion stemming from a permanent situation whereby states and political groups that claim to be representative shirk their responsibility for those they make pretenses of representing. I'm referring to the situation whereby Arab civilians grumble about being punished because of their leaders while fearing their leaders more than they fear us. We need to make the fear we sow among them greater. So this is from 2008. Does sound a little bit unhinged, a bit, I will say. But is this like the official doctrine and policy of Israel? Like as of, first of all, if this was, it's only going to be as of 2008, not for the entirety of their existence. So it'd
No,
only be
the
as
2006. No, 2006 is when they coined the, after it was 2006 Lebanon War, the effect that bombing the Dahia village in Beirut, near Beirut, that's when they solidified the doctrine.
Okay, can you tell me how this is like, or show me like, what is this? Is there like a military document or like a military? Because like, for instance, if this was the case, why in Gaza do they give people weeks to leave, or why do they like knock bomb it out? Why don't they just like?
Well,
fucking
so
start
I mean,
shelling
we can
everything?
talk about that. Like, knock bombing isn't good enough. It doesn't meet LOAC standards in Israel's history in the past. If you look
Sure,
up,
I understand. I've heard the knock
conflict,
bombing thing, but they had
Yeah.
weeks and weeks and weeks to leave. So why would Israel give them that if their goal is just this Dalia strategy or the Dahia strategy? They just want to kill everything.
they still will attack the infrastructure. Like, they still want to make the city as miserable as possible.
And it's
Hold
easier
on.
to
The
do that.
Dahia strategy that I've just read that you linked me, the implication was that Israel will be indiscriminately killing civilians. So I'm asking, why would they give them time to leave if they just want to indiscriminately kill civilians because they think they're all bad?
It's not about indiscriminately killing civilians. It's about, basically, I'm going to use this word, so be charitable, terrorizing the civilians. It's about not targeting explicit military targets. It's about targeting things that make people's lives miserable and impact the enemy military decisions based on that.
Well, they do say in Dahia, again, they're not endorsing it, like, but they say it's also infrastructure that could be used by combatants in the future, right? Because that's why Dahia, like the
Right,
Hezbollah.
but that could be the entire fucking city of Gaza, right? When we're talking about
Well,
Hamas.
Any building
yeah,
could
well,
have people
with
shooting
Dahia,
back
it was
at
like
buildings.
Hezbollah HQ, right? So, but again, I think an easier criticism you could make of Israel and Lebanon in 2006 was that like they gave themselves an impossible objective, and obviously if you're assessing your collateral versus objective, if you have a really high objective, then you have more leeway with collateral, right? And that's the problem is that
Yeah.
with 2006 they thought they could go in there, wipe out Hezbollah, and consolidate the Lebanese army, which is insane. And they did it because what, like Hezbollah kidnapped like three soldiers, so. Yeah, that was an insane
I
decision.
think also
Yeah.
like even between countries, I think wide deference is given to targeting civilian infrastructure, right? Because I think Ukraine was complaining, for instance, that Russia was targeting power plants, and that's a war crime. But I'm pretty sure under like military conflict, like wide deference is kind of given to assessing military targets. That targeting power plants and stuff is actually legitimate during wartime because power plants and powering manufacturing and an industry to create war stuff makes it a legitimate target
Wait,
for.
I think
military
this is there's critical differences talking about Russia invading Ukraine versus the IDF invading Gaza. Because
Sure, I'm just saying that
sure.
like the targeting stuff to make stuff miserable or whatever, when we talk about like targeting power plants or whatever, is even an official war, I think seems to be
Well,
seems
Here's
to
the
be a
problem I
valid way
have.
of
I
conducting
was going
war.
to say the problem I have is that people take things that are obviously very objectionable and quite horrible, like this, like what Israel did in Lebanon in 2006. Like that was fucking insane what they did there. The problem I have is when people take things that are so obviously bad and then they will add like one or two sentences to it or one or two pieces of vocabulary to just make it like a million times worse. I don't know why people feel this inclination because even today I saw Norman Finkelstein. He's like telling this story about how the IDF took out a house and there was no evidence there was any military activity in it at all. They just took out this house, and then when the injured family came outside the house, the IDF they waited for the family to come outside to get into an ambulance, and then they blew up the ambulance. And I look up the story, and what actually happened is that this residential area gets struck. We don't know whether there was any military target in there. People come out and go into an ambulance, and then the ambulance has like a fucking like a pretty like a 1 or 2 foot scratch on the side of it. So it might have been hit by a shell. It might have been hit by the same person who were just sadistically waiting for the ambulance. Or it could have been, there might have been a reason to hit the ambulance. Maybe it was being utilized by a combatant. So I don't know why people always take this thing where they take something that's objectionable, like quite bad, and they have to add a few words into it that makes it like Nazi bad. Because then when you push back on it, it's like, oh, it sounds like you're downplaying a really bad thing. And every other like anti Israel advocate, like I feel like they just feel so determined to do this, and it's like I don't
Yeah,
know
this
why
is
you
the
can just
problem. Like,
criticize it on like true terms rather than adding in a few like extra.
So wait, hold on,
things.
real quick to push back because this is against me. I feel. So I just linked a recent article. This quote though is from when the term was coined, and the full quote is from Gadi Eisenkot. He says, "We will wield disproportionate power against every village from which shots are fired in Israel." On Israel and cause immense damage and destruction. From our perspective, these are military bases. This isn't a suggestion. This is a plan that has already been authorized. That's pretty clear right there. Like he's not just saying like, you know, if it could be, it's, you know, we are now going to not what's it called? Distinguish between enemy and civilian as far as we are
hold
concerned.
on. But you're wrong because he literally said as part of that quote, IDF Northern Command Chief says in any future war, Israel would use disproportionate force on Lebanese villages from which Hezbollah will fire rockets at its cities. From our standpoint, as I said, these are not civilian villages; they are military bases.
Again,
so it's from
Yeah, again, that would just qualify the entire city of Gaza. When they were going through the West Bank, like they were bulldozing homes, they were saying, well, any one of these could be used to shoot a rocket, so this home doesn't get to exist.
And just to
Okay, I'm just saying that what you're saying, I guess it's kind of like what Lonerbox just said, is that like they're not saying we're gonna go and blow up every single civilian village. They're saying every single village.
No,
that a
if they
rocket
went and
comes
blew
from
up
will
every
be...
single village, the world would turn on its head and everyone would suddenly turn against Israel.
Sure,
If
but
they
that's what you
waylaid
made the
the
quote
entire
sound
city.
like.
But that
Like
is how it is in practice.
But it hasn't been that way in practice generally, right?
I would
Like there have been like
significant-
select things, but it's not like Israel's invaded and just like wiped out like hundreds of thousands of people or homes.
because they can't do that. They can't do that to that extent.
They
They
did
could.
wipe
What do you
out
mean?
100,000.
No, they
homes,
can't. Well,
or more.
that,
And
but
where?
Right? Let me here. I can find a link.
Are you talking about right now in Gaza?
Right now, yeah.
Right. That was 100,000 homes destroyed or damaged. I don't know what
Sure.
qualifies as
Okay. I
damage.
can see exactly what level of damage, but it is on that scale. And so your
Sure.
question,
The Gaza thing right now is on a big scale. I don't deny that,
Yeah.
right? That is on a big scale. But also, it's coming after the largest
Of course,
attack,
yeah.
basically into Israel as well.
it is, yeah. But I mean, so real quick, and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, sure. Well,
Socrates.
I just want to say, so this question of if they just wanted to kill as many Gazans as possible, why would they tell them to leave first? I mean, Israel isn't stupid, and I'm saying that they're not like also just bloodthirsty either. I'm not saying that their bloodthirst is only limited by their like understanding of public perception, but they do have some understanding of public perception, and it gives them much more of a mandate to destroy a lot more civilian architecture if they can give people some time to leave first.
And there was after the Goldstone
not-
report, after the after Cass led, after the Goldstone report, Israel officials said, "Yeah, we know we can't do certain things because the world's eye is on us." And that
Okay,
had
so
a
now
huge
but
impact.
the problem here though is like you're taking the conclusion and working backwards from it. So you're taking the conclusion that Israel actually does want to wipe out as many Gazan civilians as possible.
Hold on,
but
I
they're
have
only not doing
never,
it
I have
because
never said Israel
because of
wants
international pressure.
to massacre Gaza civilians. I've never
Okay.
said that once in this entire conversation, not in any of my chat logs.
I don't know.
So are you saying that they just
I'm
want
saying
to
they
do
use
it if they could do
disproportionate
it, they would?
force and they do not care about civilian death. That is
You
what
also
I'm
said
saying.
that they targeted civilians. He was not them not caring. I can understand.
I
I can see
did,
that.
yes.
Had that been
When
true,
you
but
have a
like,
target, that you know is civilian occupied, and you still drop on it, or when you use disproportionate force when other means are available and take out a target knowing civilians are there, yes, that is intentionally targeting civilians.
Well,
Wait, hold on,
no, we can
When you
make
say
a distinction
intentionally
there.
targeting civilians, that would be a human shield scenario, and that would actually be covered under military law. You still have to take into account proportionality, but again, I'm pretty sure deference is given to the country in figuring that out.
So
But
I linked
if a
a
civilian occupied place is being used to house military stuff, that place no longer gets coverage as being a civilian place.
it does the civilians within it still get protection under international law.
They get consideration, but that's it.
They
But if
do.
it's a
Yes.
if they feel like it's a valid military target, like that's up for Israel to justify.
All right,
Like
a
you
few
can't say
things.
that just because civilians die, it was an invalid military target.
No, you're right. Yeah, these things can be, valid military targets, but again, proportional to the threat. Again, a single grenade sitting in the basement of a hospital does not give the IDF, reason to drop a bomb. I'm not saying they did that. It's a hyperbolic example. Chill out, chat. But I linked a few things. One study from West Point talks about. Nevertheless, Hamas has violated the prohibition by, among other acts, using hostages as shields and preventing civilians from leaving northern Gaza. It has violated obligations not to use specially protected facilities as shields. And even when its actions do not amount to unlawful shielding, they are subject to requirements to take feasible passive precautions to safeguard the civilian population. But it must be emphasized that violations of these obligations by Hamas do not release Israel from its obligation to, inter alia, consider involuntary human shields in proportionality calculations when assessing feasibility precautions in attack. Earlier in that document, it talks about the differences between human shields and, human shielding by using these different areas. And the only reason to quibble over that is just that the people will say, well, they're using human shields. When is that point brought up? That point is brought up when someone says, well, look at this disproportionate number of civilian deaths. So that's kind of like carrying water and whitewashing the situation when it's a matter of Israel's decisions and how they engage as a superior military force with better technology and better trained forces, and there are options not to utilize that to minimize civilian casualties.
Yeah.
can I just get like a theory from you, Lycan, on why? Because again, like the reason I chose, if I was choosing to read about Cast Lead, the reason I chose to go with the ICRC was because they can actually work alongside the International Criminal Court. Like they can even interview people when they're being held in custody. It's not like Amnesty where they're more watching from a distance, right? So it's like, but I've got like one of the paragraphs here on Cast Lead, which is like, it says, consistent with the principle of distinction, IDF forces attacked military targets directly connected to Hamas and other terrorist organizations' military activities against Israel. And then it says, for instance, IDF forces targeted Hamas rocket launchers, stockpiles, command control facilities, weapons factories, etc. That these objects were often concealed or embedded in civilian facilities, such as residential buildings, schools, or mosques, did not render them immune from attack. In accordance with the law of armed conflict, civilian facilities that are served military purposes did not enjoy protection from attack. So I'm just wondering why do you think there's that discrepancy? Because I'm acknowledging there is,
Also, yeah,
right?
also
But
just
I'm
to
just
add on to
wondering
that
why.
too, because apparently Goldstone wrote an article for the Washington Post because he's upset about how people characterize his report. He says here, like, I continue to believe in the cause of establishing and applying international law to protracted and deadly conflicts. Our report has led to numerous lessons learned and policy changes, including the adoption of new Israel Defense Forces procedures for protecting civilians in cases of urban warfare and limiting the use of white phosphorus in civilian areas. The Palestinian Authority established an independent inquiry into our allegations of human rights abuses, assassinations, torture, and illegal detentions perpetrated by Fatah in the West Bank, especially against members of Hamas. Most of those allegations were confirmed by this inquiry. Regrettably, there have been no efforts by Hamas in Gaza to investigate the allegations of its war crimes and possible crimes against humanity. So it seems like as part of the Goldstone report, like Israel's military isn't trying to do that. The
Yeah,
HIA
so
that you mentioned, like they are trying to figure out like how to conduct warfare in a
Again,
better
the
way. Yeah.
Goldstone report, everything that he says in that was not backed up by any evidence whatsoever. He
Wait,
says some.
what wasn't backed up by what?
Read it'll take some time. Read the Goldstone report, then read his retraction, and then look up the information that further supports all the claims he made in the original report. Even 2 months before that, he was giving a speech at something like Stanford or Columbia University, where he makes a bunch of comments, and then in that article omits or changes a few things. Within 2 months, he didn't consult the 3 other people before issuing this retraction, and the 3 other people involved in this report did not issue a retraction.
Wait, can you give me like a link or something to one major claim that he retracted
Yep,
without
1
evidence
second.
of other people?
Yep.
Yeah.
No one asked me anything else while I look this up, okay?
Yeah, so I can say I think it is really important to distinguish between disproportionate harm to civilians and targeting civilians. I see these
We agree.
as really
Yeah.
critically different things. Just to Loner Box's point, because there are situations where, I guess, talking about targeting journalists, where it seems like, or targeting people on like the right to return. There are times where it seems like the IDF does target civilians, but this is very distinct from times when it's using disproportionate warfare, which, just for anybody who's in chat who's not clear on this, sometimes this gets confused with, oh, this many Palestinians died versus this many Israelis. That's not what that refers to. It refers to a single target and the like military significance of it, which Lunderbox, it seemed like you wanted to say something.
I think there's this like fundamental problem with the way that because Israel does have that policy towards the Middle East, which is that we basically just need to be as strong as and scary as possible so that they can like respect us on the international stage. But it seems to be that they also apply that same doctrine or have done to people who are under their occupation, even though those conditions are quite different. So like in the West Bank, I feel like it's weird when they apply that same strategy. And that I definitely in the 90s when after the tunnel riots, when that was when they started adopting this position of the doctrine was basically that we're going to be as fucking firm and no nonsense as possible with Palestinian rioters. And because they built that up, that was one of the big reasons for the Second Intifada escalating so much as hard as it did, right? That's why the second was so much, partly why it was so much worse than the first.
I also think Israeli doctrine on that has to change because it's not like they're surrounded by enemies that are trying to kill them at all points anymore. They have a formal alliance with Egypt. They have a formal alliance with Jordan. There's no reason, like Gaza is much scarier when Egypt is an enemy. The West Bank is much scarier when Jordan is an enemy. It's not like they're facing a unified front of countries trying to destroy them anymore, right? Hezbollah's there, Lebanon is there. I think Syria still generally doesn't like them. And you've got Iran and Qatar funding shit from abroad. But I think that the position that Israel needs to take towards its occupied territories should reflect the updated alliance statuses that they have with their surrounding neighbors. And it feels like, I think like you said, it feels like that hasn't really happened as much. They're still like on full fucking alert.
Yeah. So I'm curious because that's something I've thought about as well. This kind of structural description of what this conflict is as a war. I've thought about like what it would look like to look at this from the lens of more of like a police action. So if you look at Hamas as like kind of an entrenched like mafia or something within a civilian population, and how this is really more like you have these kind of like mafia members hidden within this population, but it's not another country that they're at war with, really. I don't know. What do you guys think about that conception? It's something that I've been considering.
I think we have to do away with the myth or the illusion that like 90% of Palestinians just want peace, and that like Hamas is like single-handedly bullying the whole population into whatever. I think we have to be more honest and contend with the idea that there are a decent number of Palestinians, that I think more than half, that support like this indefinite armed struggle or resistance against the state of Israel until some one-state solution is achieved. I think we have to start there, and the conversation has to start there.
Yeah, so that was something that I wanted to challenge you on, just going back to our conversation before. I have a few things I wanted to challenge you on, but that was one, which is this, what was the polling that you had that Palestinians like mostly now want a one state, or will only settle for a one state, something like that?
Sorry, while he's going into that, I was going to say that I feel like with the West Bank, I guess the problem is that even if you assume that all the Palestinians, like that's a majority of them are like have this resolve to wipe out Israel, then obviously if your policing of the West Bank is the kind of like hyper aggressive like stance that they took in the 90s and the 2000s, or probably still take now, then the problem is that like your policing of Palestinians is only going to strengthen the resolve further, right? Whereas I think even in the 90s there was an alternative plan for West Bank policing, which was like the peace administration, which was the idea that they would try to work to isolate fighting into particular pockets, and they would work with like they'd have a much higher threshold for moving on to live rounds, but that was dropped, right? Because they wanted.
Yeah, but I think like wasn't in '93 and afterwards, weren't they trying to I don't know, because I don't have thorough history for the last 20 years, but weren't they trying to hand over the security arrangements slowly, the IDF to the PA? But didn't the Second Intifada end up rolling a lot of that back, where the IDF just went back into towns, took over security checkpoints, and then started running shit again for a while? Did that ever get like completely reversed, or what was the outcome of that?
The outcome of what? The Second Intifada, or?
That
Or
like
the
because I thought after the second Intifada, didn't the IDF go in and basically say we're gonna like do policing and shit here for a while, like fuck the PA, like you guys clearly aren't handling it. Like did that get
Yeah,
turned
no,
back
this
to the
is
PA
this
or
is this is this is beforehand. So
okay?
this was like in the mid '90s. It was after because there was a
Okay,
tunnel
okay.
riot. It was like because I think Netanyahu, Prime Minister, tried to open up an entrance to the Western Wall that pushed into the Muslim Quarter, and there was a riot. And then after that riot, they adopted this policy of like basically no fucking around. We're just going to be like we're going to use live rounds at quite like a low threshold. We're going to come down on them hard. And there were alternatives proposed to try and take a more de-escalatory approach or like a more trying to contain the fighting approach, but that was shelved. But I just wonder if maybe they'd taken the former, then the peace administration plan, then maybe the second Intifada wouldn't have spiraled in the way that it did. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm just curious. So this is like a 2000 poll. This is for was this Camp David?
Sorry, I'll just say one more thing. Fuck.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it feels like their approach to the West Bank should be, if you're policing the West Bank, is it should be a way that like you intend to see these people as your future neighbors, not people who need to be scared off into
Yeah.
like the other Middle Eastern countries. Yeah, that's the
Exactly.
problem. Yeah.
I mean, so I'm looking at just this poll. It says 75% support or strongly support the process of reconciliation between the two people if there's a successful negotiation, and 85% support or strongly support open borders between Palestine and Israel. But this is saying that these would be separate states, and I mean, I think it's a good thing if they're imagining there could be freedom of movement. That's not saying that, there wouldn't be two countries. I know that's like a huge issue for Palestinians.
Well, hold on. You got to be really careful. Let me
Yeah. I don't know if
because
there's a
reconciliation
specific thing.
between the two people, a lot of the times, because a lot of people will say like, oh, look, like they're pushing for a solution here. They want this to work, whatever. But that reconciliation will include a full right of return, which is never happening, right?
Sure. I mean, I think that's something they would have to compromise on, probably. But I'm just not sure what specifically. And I thought you were talking about that Palestinians now want one state. This is from 2000, so I just didn't know if you were.
Oh yeah, this was prior to. Yeah, this is older polling. This is the one that I had saved in my notes. I don't know if I have. Yeah.
I mean, it's no surprise that they're maximalist like now because there hasn't been any dialogue for like 20 years,
Yeah.
right? It's so I feel like I feel like you would have to maybe see the results of some positive dialogue between like Palestinian and Israeli leaders before
like,
you can actually
here's-
see if that shifts opinion or not.
Yeah, so this is the important part down here, right? So violence, confrontation, and unilateral declaration of statehood in a scenario of failed negotiations. Today, 52% support armed attacks against Israel, while 43% oppose them. 63% believe that Hezbollah methods in South Lebanon should be emulated by Palestinians. 60% would support or strongly support violent confrontations if no agreement is reached by the 13th of September. 57% believe such confrontations would help Palestinians achieve greater gains. That's really important. Number 5 is 35% believe such confrontations would help Israel achieve greater gains. That's really important because it furthers my idea of that I think that both Israel and Palestine right now believe that they gain from the violence. Now, to be clear, this polling is 23 years old, so maybe opinions have changed. But as Launerbach said, my guess is they've only changed for the more extreme as time has gone on. Yeah, so I feel like, the appetite for fighting for a single state is there.
Wait,
I think.
so I'm not sure I see what you're talking. Like I've looked at the text that you're looking at, but I don't see anything about a single state. Like I just don't see that here.
Oh no, I don't know if the single state is here. I'm just saying that when you say number 1, 75% support or strongly support the process of reconciliation between the two
If there's
peoples.
a successful negotiation, so it's like
Yeah.
if we can make something happen, then like they feel really positive about it. But then they're split. It's like 50-50 or 60-40, whatever, toward violence if it fails, which is what we saw with the second Intifada.
Yeah, I'm just saying that that what reconciliation means is very contentious.
Well,
right?
sure, but I just don't know where you're
Because
seeing
like
anything
I
about
would
one
say that
state.
I would say like 95% of Arabs in general, 95% or more would support a peace agreement between Israel and Palestine if it was a one-state solution with full right of return. Almost every Palestinian. Would be
Okay,
like,
so
full okay with
where are
it.
you seeing that then? So I just want to nail down something to start from.
Yeah, wait, what are you looking
After
for?
you guys
So-
nailed this, I want to go back to the Goldstone.
Sure.
thing.
Yes. So you were saying that it seems like I think you were quoting like something like 66% of Palestinians now only want one state. 33% might go for two.
Yeah, I thought I had this. I just looked at my notes. This might have been another poll that I looked at, and maybe
Because it
don't
seems like you have a
have-
lot writing on this idea that Palestinians are basically like totally black-pilled on having two-state. And so I think that's really important to
Yeah, sure.
to
Let me
really dig
see if I can
into.
find something more recent.
And those polls can be tough to do, especially I imagine within Gaza that might be really, really hard.
Hmm.
Are you asking for polling about just people who want like a one-state solution, like not binational, but just a Palestinian state?
Yeah, because
So I think usually the binational one-state solution is the least popular one, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's two-state, and then it's the one Palestinian state. It's usually how it goes.
sure, yeah, but I think to your point about like okay, probably every party is going to start with their maximalist position and then compromise down to what they'll accept. So like this was another thing. So Destiny, you're saying that it seems like the Palestinians like never accept the peace agreements. I don't know if you've looked into the Taba summit. I hadn't looked like deeply into this, but it looked like Arafat accepted the plan, and then the Israelis were like,
Absolutely not.
"Sorry, what?
Absolutely not.
I'm prepared to accept it. Absolutely."
I believe that statement was made. So after the Camp David summit in 2000, Arafat would not issue any joint statement with the United States, or was it who was Camp David? Who was the leader? It wasn't Sharon, was it? Oh, yeah,
Barack,
Barack. Yeah. So because no joint statement was made, and the U.S. and Israel were pushing for one to quell like the people from rioting after no peace agreement was made, after the Taba summit, there was a joint statement made, and one of those joint statements made was essentially saying like we're closer than we ever have been to peace. We're like ready to sign. That was the public statement made, but privately nothing was accepted from Arafat. Absolutely not. I know that Arafat wouldn't have accepted it because they probably, like you said earlier, remember there were probably still major disagreements on the table about the control of Jerusalem, especially East Jerusalem, and that had never gotten fine pointed out. Like nobody made any decisions
but
there.
he said that he accepted it, and then the Israelis said that it was no longer on the table.
Wait, show me that. There's no way.
Yeah.
I know this is not true.
Here's
I'm
a
curious. Yeah,
Guardian
we're doing it. Yeah.
article.
This is the one where he said he approved the plan 18 months after it started, and then by then it was already done.
Oh,
Sure.
wait. So this is like a year plus into the second Intifada.
Yeah.
Oh, he might have said it then, but that's yeah.
But I mean,
But
that's
I don't think that's.
I mean, that's him
relevant.
accepting whatever those terms were, and then the Israelis saying it's. I mean, I'm not saying it's like a simple or unmessy situation, but
Well, but the second Intifada was incredibly violent.
Sure.
To say that he would have accepted Camp David after, from the Israeli perception, they basically were trying to overthrow the country and take it over, and they're like, "Fuck, we failed. Okay, let's go." That seems to be like a repeated pattern of like
they were
we
trying to
reject
take over
this,
the
we fight, we
country.
fail, and we go back.
I thought it was just like a lot of terror attacks and like stabbings.
The
and,
second Intifada was like widespread violence all over Israel. That yeah.
Because
I
almost
don't-
every other day there were bombings in
Yeah.
Israel or
Yeah.
attacks. Yeah. But I think the problem is like I think there's one interpretation which is that Arafat had hoped that the violence of the Second Intifada would have pushed for better concessions than Camp David. But
Yeah.
the problem was that it got Sharon elected, and Sharon wasn't going to go to any peace talks ever. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then back to, well, okay. So I think so we have this one thing on the record where, I mean, whatever you want to say about the conditions surrounding those peace talks, it seemed like Arafat was accepting, and I mean,
Well, no.
there was no
He
counter.
explicitly, he did not do it initially. He didn't accept it, and
Not
that was the
initially.
big deal. Was that there wasn't a counter. Like it even says in the article link me, the Israelis had claimed the Taba package was generous and that Mr. Arafat had been foolish not to grab it. Mr. Arafat had repeatedly insisted that it was far from generous. I'm pretty sure we had diplomatic ties with oh my God, Sadat. I think Egypt was at the time. I think he was the leader, or not, or was this after that? He might have already been assassinated, actually. But like Egypt was talking to him, Saudi Arabia was talking to him. I'm pretty sure like most of the other Arab leaders had no fucking idea how Arafat didn't accept what was on the table for the Taba summit, which was a continuation of the Camp David talks. It was like wild that he didn't accept it. But there are also a lot of statements from people around Yasser Arafat at the time that he was basically gearing up for the second Intifada because he wanted to fight afterwards. Yeah, but I mean, you can Yeah, the only evidence of Arafat, quote unquote, accepting this was like 2 years after the conversation, basically, which I don't think is good because all of the reported stuff at the time, even the stuff that's more favorable to the Palestinians, says that Arafat basically walked away with no counteroffer, which seemed insane.
Sure, but I mean, if
I think there's again like I don't think it's deniable that he wanted to use like a second intifada because he probably expected it would be more like the first one. And out of the first intifada, they got Oslo, right? So he probably thought that they would get more concessions. And it seemed to be that the land concessions in Taba and Geneva were much more generous than Camp David because it was like
the Camp David
you
was
didn't
like
have that
9 or
stupid
10
like
to
Jordan
1.
Valley shit. Yeah,
Wait,
yeah.
I thought, am I wrong? I thought that Taba was largely a continuation of what was put forth at Camp David. Am I crazy there? Is that not true?
But the land swaps, I think, were more generous at
Was
Taba.
it shifted?
They might have been more
Pretty
generous
sure.
at Taba, but even in
Yeah.
Camp David, I thought that's where like in Camp David, wasn't that where you were getting some of these like 95% territorial? Wait, wasn't?
91, 92, wasn't it?
I think they had it up to 95%. It was like insane because this is why I'm pretty sure I want to say it was the leader of Saudi Arabia at the time, and I think the Egyptian leader were completely bewildered why the fuck Arafat didn't accept it because it was like an unbelievable, like almost contiguous territory. The land amount was insane. The $30 billion international fund that would have been set up for Palestinian refugees. I believe there was 100,000 refugees of Palestinians that were allowed to return back to Israel if they would have accepted it. Yeah, the deal on the table was unbelievable. And that's why I think there were a lot of Arab leaders that were shocked. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, they got a different source on this, but there were a lot of Arab leaders, I believe, that were shocked that he walked away from that deal. Let me see if I can find this 95% number. Oh, and then also something that I heard from, there were a couple books published by people that were around these talks or whatever, that basically the idea was that Arafat walked into that thinking that like 91% is never going to happen. But as he started to get more and more in the negotiations, he started to become like the goalpost was moving to where 91% wasn't enough. Now he needed 2% swaps. 93% wasn't enough. Now he wanted 95%. When he got 95% and the Jerusalem stuff was worked out, he just walked away from it. And then he wanted to do the second intifada. And I was like, fuck.
Does anyone have a good source on what the kind of final state of those talks were?
I think
Which
you can
talks?
Google
Of
like
the Tab-
I think you can
Taba Summit.
I think you can Google Camp David Accords maps, and you can look at what the proposal was in terms of what was being offered. Hold on, there's
Well-
at our fun Jewish virtual
But
library.
if the Taba Summit was really different than the Camp David, because the Camp David was apparently like pretty bad. So
I don't think Camp David was bad. I don't think anybody characterized it that way.
one of Israel's, I don't know if you've seen this quote, but from this guy Ben Ami, one of Israel's chief negotiators at Camp David, later commented, "I would have rejected Camp David as well." That they demand.
Yeah,
a
no,
lot
there
of
was
Palestinians.
definitely a lot of criticism of Camp David because I thought the Clinton parameters, which was the new border arrangement, which would be like 97% of the West Bank, that came after Camp David. No.
I don't know about the 97% one, but if you look at the bottom one, you can see the Israeli proposal for a final map, which is still pretty divided with like highways and shit, but you've got like the Gaza Strip, you've got the West Bank being connected. This area to the east is like Israeli control of the border, but like this was the Israel proposal, and then there was never a counter proposal given to the end of this map. But even this right here, I would argue is way better than like the dog shit offered to like Trump that I think was
Yeah,
all
of
planned.
course, yeah.
Anything's better than-
It's
Yeah.
definitely better than Trump's, but yeah, no, I think after the thing. Here's one thing I don't get is like I can get Arafat walking away and wanting to start violence because he thinks violence will get him a better concession, but I don't get why. After walking away from Camp David, I think communications between negotiators reopened within just like a couple of months, and I also don't get why they're saying that he just like. And it seems to be the case that they did get more by going again because, yeah, the Clinton plan came from after Camp David failed. And that was when it involved 97% of the West Bank, which would have been more than.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm
But then
pretty
that-
sure Camp
but
David was
then-
92. Unless it was 95, you're saying.
I think it was, wait, it says a few weeks after that, now in December, the Israelis took it a step further. Here they accepted the Palestinians receiving 95% without word on swaps. So this might have been the deals offered after Camp David. That Camp
Yeah, that's
David
what I
max
thought,
was
yeah.
93%, and it might have been a few weeks afterwards of the 95%.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
that contiguous thing was seen at the big line, the big Israeli like cleavage that went from fucking Jerusalem through to the Jordan River, and also the big one from on the north to this Ariel settlement was kind of seen as a threat that like they would have had any right to kind of intrude even more with like security installations around that place because they've done that
Possibly.
with
I
other-
mean, the
yeah.
Israeli argument was supposed to be that they would have highways, I think, going over it, or that this highway would go over it, just so that basically Israel had an unrestricted path to the Jordanian border. I mean, I'm not saying it's like the most amazing fucking thing in the world. Obviously, having your big country of Palestine, your two states, would be amazing. But like in terms of what they could have reasonably gotten, I feel like the Taba summit was. I wouldn't have expected a deal this generous after the 40 years or whatever of 35 years of occupation and all that shit. And there should have been counter negotiations here for Arafat pushing for maybe a little bit more, or to settle things out on his side. There should have been a deal reached here. Something should have been penned here, I think.
Just looking at that map, so the last link that you sent, so
the Israeli offer for the final map.
yeah. So I don't know if this is this is from Camp David. This isn't from the Taba.
Correct.
Yeah. So I know with that it was like 9-1 or 10-1 land swaps, and I know that there's also, I don't know a huge amount about this, but I've heard that there's massive differences in the quality of the land. So you have all
Correct.
of this.
Some of the reasons why they
Yeah.
didn't want to land swap at first was because a lot of what Barak was offering, I believe, at Camp David, the
was
land
just
swaps were
desert.
like Negev desert, which
just-
the Palestinians were like, fuck
it's-
this is cocked
And
up.
they
But I
take
think
all
that's
of the
why-
land next to like the water, which is
Yeah. But I think that's why, well, one, I think Camp David and I think the Taba afterwards had shared agreements on how the water would be utilized. And two, I believe they ditched the shitty land swaps for the Negev desert at the Taba summit as well, because they realized like this is, they're not going to go for this.
if anyone can find like the actual final, some plans for the Tabat, that'd be interesting. But again, just going back to that, I mean, what should the responsibility, right? So this was like a new Israeli government. So at the point that Arafat did accept that offer, or say he did, maybe we can dig more into it.
Well,
I mean,
careful. We got to be really careful when we say he never accepted it. He just said after it was basically done, and like a year and a half later, he's like, "Oh, well, I would accept that now." But that was untenable at that point. That's wild. It doesn't matter at that point.
So why is
I also
that?
think he didn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
No, please.
I wonder, because again, even after Taba, like then the Geneva Initiative, which came from, which kind of consolidated the Clinton parameters even further, was like that. Even that was probably, I think, was seen as more favorable than Taba, and again, like it had majority support on both sides for at least like 1 year. But I wonder if the problem it seems to be with the negotiations, from what I've seen, is that you've got kind of two conflicting like narratives, and that Israel feels like these people have like tried to fight with us for 50 or 60 years. They've tried to destroy us, and like they just need to accept like almost like terms of surrender, right? Like this, they had to settle with this because they're not going to, because we've established ourselves in the world. Whereas Palestinians feel like, and I think this is the big problem with the Israeli narrative, which seems to lump Arabs and Palestinians under exactly the same umbrella, is that Palestinians feel like they've been oppressed for 50 or 60 years and they're owed something like reparations.
Yeah, that's why I feel like that basically goes back to the very first thing I said, where I feel like the issue is Israel feels like if they maintain the status quo and keep fighting, they'll get more, and Palestinians feel like they're never being given enough, so they need to keep fighting. I feel like that's the,
But I do wonder, I think if Arafat had accepted Camp David, I feel like the Palestinians would have rejected it anyway, and they probably would have, because there was already a
Sure,
buildup
I
of
mean-
violence in the
I mean,
youth
Camp
wing.
David
that's
was really
arguably
bad.
that's why. Arguably, well, hold on. I don't think Camp David was really bad. Okay, not compared to where they are now.
Well-
Okay, and even for the settlement there, like, but also Arafat. I think Lonerbucks, you're probably right, because I think one of the reasons why people theorize that Arafat walked away from that was because he was seen as being a weakening leader, that he was losing authority, that if he cucked out to the Israeli government on this, like people wouldn't back him or whatever. So it was like mounting internal political pressure that essentially made him walk away from that. So it might be the case that if he would have accepted it, the Palestinians would have refused, but maybe not. Maybe he would have gotten some to go along with him. Like maybe a counter offer could have been worked out. I'm going to be honest. I see this Geneva initiative brought up a lot, but I hadn't read deeply into this because I think this is later to 2003. Is this an even better Taba summit thing for the Palestinians? Because
Well, I
it
know
looks
it's
like
more
here I'm seeing like
popular,
Jerusalem
but-
being divided administratively, with East and West Jerusalem having like multinational forces and stuff, and then most Israeli settlements being removed too. Jesus.
Yeah, this was the Clinton parameters, wasn't it? That like the Palestinians would control the Arab parts of East Jerusalem, and Israelis would control the Jewish ones. Yeah.
What happened? What happened with this?
Well, Sharon just didn't want to start. I think
Oh,
Arafat
okay, it
said
was
that
Sharon
it
at
was
that
a
point.
great initiative, but Sharon was just like, no. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, gotcha.
And I think so. I've also heard people say that, I haven't read much about this one, but I've heard like Roadmap to Peace was also like a very optimistic like starting point. But again, I think I really don't like Sharon. Maybe I'm just biased because of Beirut and shit. But like I think the big controversy here was that Sharon was like told that the starting point would be a freeze in settlements before this roadmap to peace could start, and Sharon didn't want to because people were having families in the settlements. So I think there's this quote of him saying like, "What do you want them to do? Have abortions?" Yeah.
Sure. I mean, keep in mind, right? Sharon's background, right, is of like he's a far right politician. He was elected in response to everything else. Like he was an army fucking military commander for how many fucking years, how many decades? Yeah, and then how many massacres was he involved in? I think 2, right? He was involved in the he was involved in the Kibya one, and I think he was involved in the that Sabra and Shatila one. He was the one that was the leader during that, which was fucking wild. So yeah, Sharon is definitely a hardcore, not great guy, and he was definitely elected for a particular reason, following the Second Intifada, and it's not surprising that his position on Palestinians, given this guy's background is fucking war and military, is going to be to like be as antagonistic as possible, right? Or to be relatively antagonistic, more so than, you know, Rabin or Barak, probably, right?
So I want to go back a little bit to the evidence I provided. So I provided a link to the actual Goldstone speech. That's the one from mauriceostrov.tripod.com. But I posted a thing that shows the top is Goldstone's statement on April 2011. And he just says, for this one, this is in the retraction, reconsidering the Goldstone report or whatever for the Washington
Wait.
Post.
Where is this link? Can you show me? Or...
It's in chat pictures. I have pictures of it. And then I have the link of it. I linked the actual thing, but I need to read the pictures because it shows what's highlighted. So look at the pictures and you can compare after. Like it's not, I'm not lying to you.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. This is the Haaretz article, right?
No, this is the, here, I'll reply to it. So, but you need to look at the pictures to see what's different. So that is the thing, so you can get the entire transcript of his notes. The first thing he says in the retraction when he's referring to the death of this family is he says, the most serious attack the Goldstone report focused on was the killing of some 29 members of the Al-Samuni family in their home. The shelling of the home...
I'm sorry, real quick. I just want... This Maurice Ostrov, this has that quote?
Yes.
Okay, I'm control Fing and I don't see it. Serious attack?
That is the, hold on. It's serious single most incident.
Wait, you said
so
serious single...
Stephen, follow.
Yeah.
The first part of that image I sent you is from the Goldstone's retraction in the New York Post.
Okay,
I'm sorry, the Washington Post. Washington Post.
Okay, hold on.
It's like,
I can link that if you need it.
29, I think, right? Single most serious incident.
Here, there's the Washington, that's the retraction. And he says, for example, the most serious attack the Goldstone report focused on was the killing of some 29 members of the Al-Samuni family.
Okay. The most serious attack the Goldstone report focused on was the killing of some 20. Yes, I see this. Okay.
Okay, cool. Now, and you can go through the .tripod.com thing that I replied to at the period.
Okay.
But if you look at the images, it highlights for you what was omitted. So the omissions are significant portions of both the Amnesty International and the United Nations report that came out, which Goldstone praised.
Wait, I'm so confused. Hold on. Okay, hold on. We have to work with like full.
Do you think I'm lying to you?
No, I know, but I can't do the like read a picture. So let's hold on. Let's just take a whole step back. Okay, we're talking about the Goldstone report right now, right? And we're talking about the author of the Goldstone report. You said that he made retractions later, correct? But you're saying the retractions that he made aren't supported by something else.
They aren't supported by evidence. He makes no evidentiary claims that disprove it.
Okay, so let's start with the first thing. Can you show me the first thing is what it was his retraction?
His retraction, the full paragraph is, I mean, you have the article, just control F, the most serious, and I will read it.
Okay.
For example, the most serious attack the Goldstone report focused on was the killing of some 29 members of the Al-Samuni family in their home. The shelling of the home was apparently the consequence of an Israeli commander's erroneous interpretation of a drone image, and an Israeli officer is under investigation for having ordered the attack. Again, I want to read that sentence one more time. The shelling of the home was apparently the consequence of an Israeli commander's erroneous interpretation of a drone image, and an Israeli officer is under investigation for having ordered the attack. While the length of this investigation is frustrating, it appears an appropriate process way, and I am confident that if the officer is found to have been negligent, Israel will respond accordingly. The purpose of these investigations, as I've always said, is to ensure accountability for proper actions, not to second guess, with the benefit of hindsight, commanders making difficult battlefield decisions.
Okay.
That's what he says in the retraction. 2 months
see that.
beforehand, he includes way more significant points that are from the Amnesty International report from March 2011 and the UN account from March 2011.
Okay, so now tell me exactly what story we're reading here. What link am I reading here?
So this is the link from Maurice Ostroff.tripod.com. These are from his speech at Stanford.
Okay, you said this had to do with something that came out in March of 2011 because this
So
is
the reports due, and he gave his speech before his retraction.
I understand. Okay, so this is a speech that he's giving at a Stanford University panel on January 20th, 2011.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what am I reading here?
So in that what he omits, I'll just read the omitted parts. Omitted, again, with no evidence provided in his retraction.
Wait. When you say he omitted it from the Goldstone report. He omitted it from his
He
retraction.
omitted it from his retraction.
Okay.
He did not include or address these in his retraction.
Okay, go ahead.
The IDF decided to take over the house of Saleh al-Samouni as part of the IDF ground operation. They ordered its occupants to relocate to the home of Wael al-Samouni. It was located about 35 yards away within sight of the Israeli soldiers. In the result, there were over 100 members of the family gathered in the single-story home of Wael al-Samouni. Early on in the cold wintry morning of 5 January, several male members of the al-Samouni family went outside to gather firewood. They were in clear sight of the Israeli troops. Next highlighted point that's
Wait, hold on, real quick. This
I'll read
sounds
the
like
whole
it's
thing if you
referring-
want.
Sure, yeah, that's fine, but real quick. This sounds like it's referring to something completely different.
Nope.
than-
This is that same
Is
incident.
this the same thing? Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
All right, okay. Oh, because it is the al-Samouni family. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
A next omitted part, the men, women, and children were known by the Israeli troops to be civilians and were ordered by them to relocate to a house that was in the vicinity of their command post. Members of the
Wait, why did we skip reading everything that came after that?
I'll read the entire thing. If we want to do that, cool.
Sure. Okay. So wait, and also, where did you skip to? How far down?
I'm just reading the highlighted omissions.
Okay, you keep saying omissions.
He did
When
not.
you say omissions, you mean things that he's not mentioning when he says that the
In
investigation.
his retraction, he did not. This is a speech of his from January. He issued his retraction in April, and I'm saying that from a speech a few months before, and from his report, these are things that he is talking to, and that he has given no evidence as to why these are being retracted.
Well, did this story end up in the Goldstone report, or was this just while the report was ongoing and it hadn't been verified yet?
The incident is documented in the Goldstone report and further reports, which is the Amnesty International report from 2011, March, and the UN report from March of 2011 further corroborated these. So these were in the report. They were investigated.
Okay, so then let's just, from 31 on down. Early on the cold, wintry morning of the 5th of January, several male members of the al-Samouni family went outside to gather firewood. They were in clear sight of the Israeli troops. As the men returned with the firewood, projectors fired from helicopter gunships killed or injured them. Immediately after that, further projectiles hit the house. 21 members of the family were killed, some of them young children and women. 19 were injured. Of those injured, another 8 subsequently died from their injuries. The number of members of the family killed was thus 29. That was the evidence considered credible and supported by ambulance records and reports given at the time to non-governmental organizations. It led the fact-finding mission to conclude that, as a probability, the attack on the al-Samouni family was constituted a deliberate attack on civilians. The crucial consideration was that the men, women, and children were known by the Israeli troops to be civilians and were ordered by them to relocate to a house that was in the vicinity of their command post. Members of the al-Samouni family had regarded the presence of the IDF as a guarantee of their safety. 2 inquiries by the Israeli military reported that there was no evidence of unlawful behavior on the part of the Israeli army with regard to this incident. Then, at the end of October 2010, almost 22 months after the incident, to the credit of the Israeli military police, they announced that they were investigating whether the airstrike against the al-Samouni home was authorized by a senior Givati brigade commander who had been warned of the danger of civilians. At about the same time, there were reports that the attack followed upon the receipt of photographs by the Israeli military from a drone showing that that was incorrectly interpreted to be a group of men carrying rocket launchers towards a house. The order was given to to bomb the men and the building. According to these reports, the photograph received that the drone was not of high quality and in fact showed the men carrying firewood to the El home. The results of this military police investigation are as of yet unknown. So it sounds like he didn't actually retract anything in this Washington Post story. It sounds like he's saying basically exactly what was said here, that there was indeed a drone photo that was shitty and then a commander gave an order.
That was his report from then, but then I can get you the reports or you can read the images. You let me know what you want to do.
Well, we can do both.
But the next images are the Amnesty International excerpt from the Amnesty International report from March 2011, which was a couple months after the January one, his January speech. And yeah, so do you want to read those?
Yeah, give me either one. Yeah, because right now this isn't contradicting anything. It seems like it's reinforcing the Washington Post story.
How do you say that? Because the Washington Post in his Washington Post
he says, for example, the most serious attack the Goldstone report focused on was the killing of some 29 members of the al-Samuni family in their home. The shelling of the home was apparently the consequence of an Israeli commander's erroneous interpretation of a drone image, and an Israeli officer is under investigation for having ordered the attack. While the length of this investigation is frustrating, it appears that an appropriate process is underway, and I'm confident that the officer has found to have been negligent. Israel will respond accordingly. Then when I look back here, it seems like you're saying they omitted a bunch of evidence, but it seems like you were the
evidence that they had told them to locate to that. They were within 35 yards of the troops. They knew they existed there. They were the ones who told them to go there, and then they called in an attack on it.
But it wasn't. No. It doesn't sound like those troops that were right there that were familiar with them. It doesn't sound like they called an attack at all. It doesn't even sound like they were part of the attack. It sounds like an attack was called in far away from another commander, and that an airship was what moved in and was the one that bombed these things. That it wasn't
your troops are that close. You are not having a gunship come in like that and not communicating with them.
I could be totally wrong, and you're the military guy here, but I would be shocked if I was wrong here. If you have a commanding officer in some other place, and he calls in an airstrike on a village that's close by to you, and then those troops are informed of it, do you think those troops complain to their CO and go, hold on, you need to stop that strike? Is that something that happens? Or do you rely on the intelligence that you have in another place and assume, well, they probably know something that I don't, and you just follow orders?
If you were operating within that vicinity, within 35 yards of anything, there's not going to be a gunship. No AC-130, no fucking Apache, nothing is going to come in and start blowing shit up without communicating with you.
No, I understand there's going to be a communication, but are the soldiers on the ground? One, they're not
directing.
You
will absolutely get. You will have the commander on the ground that will absolutely return a radio and be like, "Yeah, do not fucking do this."
I don't think that's true.
That is 1,000% true.
So you're telling me then that all of these troops were nearby, they knew it was civilians, and that even though it was other intelligence that led to the attack on this house, the guys on the ground were like, fuck it, we're not going to say shit, we're going to let all these civilians get killed?
That is the evidence against them, yes.
Wait. Where is the evidence of that? Because nothing in here supports that version of events.
Hold on. First, let me link these, okay? So there is the, I think that, let me make sure I link the right one.
Also, there's also no evidence that they were like 35 yards away when this attack happened. Like, I don't know if that's... Because it was on January 4th that members of the Givati Brigade of the IDF took over the house, and then it was on the morning of the 5th that house apparently got attacked by... It sounded like it was an airship or a helicopter or something. The order was given to bomb the men in the building.
That's the wrong link. Don't click that. It's a different thing.
Here, while you're looking for that, just way back to where we're talking about like one state, two state, Palestinian interest. I don't know if this was like the poll, Destiny, that you were talking about, support for two-state solution. It seemed like part of this was looking at really just how likely they think it would be or how much faith they have that this will happen. So it's about the amount of like trust in Biden, the amount of like support for a two-state solution. I'm not sure if this is what you were looking at when you were...
It might have been. Real quick, I got two questions from chat. What is your best opinion towards the people who call the Ashkenazi Holocaust survivors colonizers for returning to Israel? My family was from Prussia, nowhere to go back to. I don't know how to explain to these people it's not colonization. I mean, like, if you're a Jew and you're moving to Israel from, like, some part of Europe or Russia, you're kind of colonizing. I mean, even if you're getting expelled from another area, like, it's kind of what you're doing, regardless of why you're leaving the other area. Somebody else said, did you ever check civilian casualty ratio during the end of the 2008 war? I think Israel had it as 1-to-1 compared with the 2014 Gaza war. It was 3-to-1. Current estimates have it about 10-to-1 so far in 2023. Okay, just reading. Okay, waiting for Lycans, link. Amnesty International. Okay, what page do you want me to go to here? Or should I just Google like the name of the family?
I'll tell you. Give me 1 second. For that one, Control F, one prominent case.
Control F, one prominent case. One prominent case that was examined by the UN fact-finding mission and various human rights groups and is the subject of an ongoing Israeli criminal investigation is the killing of some 21 members of the al-Samuni family who were sheltering in their home of Wa'al al-Samuni when it was struck by missiles or shells on the 5th of January 2009. The Israeli military announced that an MPCID investigation had been opened into the incident on the 6th of July 2010. On the 21st of October 2010, Colonel Ilan Malka, who was commander of the Givati Brigade during Operation Cast Lead and was allegedly involved in approving the airstrike which killed 21 members of the al-Samuni family, was questioned under caution by military police. According to media reports, he claimed that he was unaware of the presence of civilians in the building when he approved the strike. The decision to approve the airstrike was reportedly based on drone photographs of men from the al-Samuni family breaking apart boards for firewood. The photographs were interpreted in the war room as Palestinians armed with rocket-propelled grenades. But at the time the photographs were received, the family had already been confined to the building and surrounded and observed by soldiers from the Givati Brigade and at least 6 different nearby outposts for more than 24 hours. At least some soldiers in the outposts would have known that the family were civilians since they themselves had ordered the family to gather in Wa'al al-Samuni's home. Some of these officers reportedly testified to the military investigators that they had warned Colonel Malka that there could be civilians in the area. Colonel Malka is currently Assistant Chief of Staff for Operations at IDF Central Command. His promotion to the rank of Brigadier General is postponed due to the investigation. Senior military commanders, including Yoav Gallant, former head of the IDF Southern Command, and the head of the IDF Central Command, Avi Mizrahi, have reportedly opposed an MPCID investigation of the case, while others have praised Colonel Malka's professionalism and caution against him turning into a scapegoat. Media reports also said, okay, I think that was it. Okay, so what about this?
And then we'll do the other one, and then we'll make the point. So the next one, Control F, the committee does not have.
Control F. Wait, in the same report?
No, this is the other one I linked.
Wait, which other one? Where? The English
OCHR.
Okay, hold on.
OHCHR.
The committee does not have sufficient information to establish the current status of the ongoing criminal investigations into the killings of Atiyah and Ahmad Samuni, the attack on the Wa'al Samuni house, and the shootings of Iyad Samuni. This is of considerable concern. Reportedly, 24 civilians were killed and 19 were injured in the related incidents on the 4th of January 2009. Furthermore, the events may relate both to the actions and decisions of soldiers on the ground and senior officers located in the war room, as well as to the broader issues implicating the rules of engagement and use of drones. There are also reports indicating that the MAG's decision to investigate was opposed by the then head of the IDF Southern Command. Media reports further informed that a senior officer who was questioned under caution and had his promotion put on hold told investigators that he was not warned that civilians were at the location. However, some of those civilians have been ordered there by IDF soldiers from the same officer's unit and Air Forces Air Force officers reportedly informed him of the possible presence of civilians. Despite allegedly being made aware of this information, the officer apparently approved airstrikes that killed 21 people and injured 19 gathered in the al-Samuni house. Media sources also report that the incident had been described as a legitimate interpretation of drone photographs portrayed on a screen, and that the Special Command investigation, initiated 10 months after the incidents, did not conclude that there had been anything out of the ordinary in the strike. As of the 24th of October 2010, according to media reports, no decision has been made as to whether or not the officer would stand trial. The same officer who assertedly called in the strike reportedly insisted that ambulances not enter the sector under his control, fearing attempts to kidnap soldiers. Okay, what about this?
So the point is that he goes in and he does his retraction. He casts.
Wait. To be clear, no retraction has been done.
No, that was the whole article in WAPO was a retraction of the report.
Wait. What part of this paragraph that we're reading for this attack is a retraction?
Okay. It's that he goes in and he takes out all of the evidence that is against the IDF in the area, that they had ordered the civilians to go into that house, that they had been observed for over 24 hours, that they were reports that they were all aware of the civilian, that many were aware of the civilians there.
None of this is relevant.
It is very relevant. The fact
question is, did the guy who called in the airstrike right, was it a good or valid interpretation of the images they saw? That's the first question. And the second question is, once it was called in, did the commander on the ground convey appropriately or understand appropriately that the civilians were still in that house? Those are the two questions, right? Which is apparently what the investigation is trying to ascertain. But none of that is retracted here. It's all stated here.
No, come on. The retraction is him saying in his statement, all he says is the most serious attack on the Goldstone report focused on was the killing of some 29 members of the al-Samuni family in their home. The shelling of the home was apparently the consequence of an Israeli commander's erroneous interpretation of a drone image. But he gives nothing to the accounts of IDF having put the people there, the IDF having observed them for a notable amount of time. None of that is discussed. None of that is hand waved. And in the overall report, he says we know more things now than we did then, but nothing is proffered as far as to what exactly we knew, what undermined
because
all of that other.
It's under investigation.
It's under investigation, but again, nothing is provided that says that the claim that the IDF put those people there, that they knew about them. None of that was counterfacted.
The claim isn't whether or not the IDF is. That's like saying the U.S. Army.
They
knew
reported.
something.
Didn't you just read out loud that they reported?
The question is, well, yeah, but everything is really vague. Remember how the report said, where is it? Some of those civilians have been ordered there by IDF soldiers from that same officers unit, and Air Force officers reportedly informed him of the possible presence of civilians. This is why an investigation is taking place, right? It seems like there's a little bit of haze here in terms of should he have known that there were civilians in that particular house and that it wasn't rockets, it was something else going on. That's why there's an investigation taking place. Right?
Again, first of all, from military experience, no one is doing an attack that close to other troops without those other troops being informed. Second of all, it says they reportedly told people like, hey, there may be civilians in the area. Third, again, the IDF on the ground put those people there in that house.
Okay, that's why there's an
and
investigation
observed them.
Because
they knew there were civilians. But what I'm saying is,
you're making the
tell me
claim
you would read Goldstone's statement and say he is not casting doubt at all on the amnesty and UN reports and the report that he put out himself.
I don't think there's any doubt being casted. For example, the most serious attack, the Goldstone report focused on the killing of some 29 members of the al-Samuni family in their home. So he's talking about killing of 29 people in one shelling. The shelling of the home was apparently the consequence of an Israeli commander's erroneous interpretation of a drone image, and an Israeli officer is under investigation for having ordered the attack. That's a summary of what happened. There was potentially a bad interpretation of a drone image. Maybe, are you just upset here that he didn't include one more sentence saying
no,
there were reports that the IDF knew there were civilians in that area? Because it seems like what you want to say,
substantive evidence. He doesn't, that drone image has never been released publicly. U.S. has done that before. That drone image has never been released publicly. He provides no evidence. He gives a very wishy-washy, very watered-down account and says, it was apparently a drone image and that investigation's ongoing. He says nothing about how any of the other evidence has been disproven.
I don't think
that
any
is
of the
significant.
The other evidence hasn't been disproven, though. I don't even think it's contested. The IDF certainly did order those people to stay in the house. Nobody's contesting that. There were IDF soldiers on the ground that knew there were members in the house. Nobody's contesting that. The question is whether or not it was knowingly bombed by somebody who should have known there were civilians in there for no good reason. That's the question. Right?
The Goldstone report admonished them for this action, and because it admonished them for the evidence that was there, that they knew they were there, they told them to be there, they had observed them for 24 hours. They knew there were civilians.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You can link me the Goldstone report if you want, but based on what I've read so far, I'm 99% certain that if we read that Goldstone report, the strongest admonishment they're going to have is that there was negligence done here in protecting the people. I seriously doubt it says there was an intentional targeting of civilians. But if you want, you can link the report and we'll go through it. But I guarantee you that's what it's going to say. But we can go through it. I welcome you to link it. We can read it if you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So are we arguing about whether the report was saying that he targeted civilians, and are we arguing about whether Goldstone retracted?
So it sounds like Lycan is basically making the argument that the report is essentially saying it was an intentional murdering of an entire family in a house. And Lycan is saying that when Goldstone talks about it in this WAPO article, he's saying that, well, maybe it was just a mistake because of a misinterpretation of a drone image. Mm-hmm. And Lycan is using evidence from earlier reports that were published that basically says the same thing, but has a couple other facts about how the IDF ordered those people to be in the houses. And Lycan thinks that that's strong enough evidence to prove that the officer knew that there were civilians there that weren't representing a threat to the IDF, and so he knowingly just had an airstrike called in on a civilian house to kill civilians, which there's been zero evidence supported for. That's an outstanding claim.
So first of all, it was a fact-finding mission, not an investigation. The Goldstone report. I mean, I think meaningful distinction. But either way, any claims against, war crimes or whatever. I think he said something about, it was always going to be conditional because our job is just to find the facts, not to, make final determinations. But I linked the
but
report.
I just want to. Yeah, is the Goldstone report? Where is it?
I just linked it.
Okay, it's.
And that's what you
mission.
Control F.
Okay, this is what you just linked me. This is the Goldstone report. Is it? The Human Rights in Palestine and Other Occupied Arab Territories reported the United Nations fact-finding mission on the Gaza conflict. And what, Goldstone was like the head of this? Is that why
Yes.
it's called the Goldstone report?
Yep.
President appointed Justice Richard Goldstone, former judge. Okay. Now, what am I looking for? The mission investigate 11 incidents in which the Israeli armed forces launched direct attacks on civilians with lethal outcomes. Do I want to control F Shamuni or?
No, I typed what to do. But before you do that, I want to read something. On 1 April 2011, Goldstone retracted his claim that that it was Israeli government
Wait,
policy.
link what you're reading.
Yep.
Okay.
1 second.
Also, wait, while you link that, I'll just read this, what the Goldstone report said. The mission investigated 11 incidents in which the Israeli armed forces launched direct attacks against civilians with lethal outcome. The facts in all, bar one of the attacks, indicate no justifiable military objective. The first two are attacks on houses in the Al Samuni neighborhood south of Gaza City, including the shelling of a house in which Palestinian civilians have been forced to assemble by the Israeli armed forces. The following group of 7 incidents concerned the shooting of civilians while they were trying to leave their homes to walk to a safer place, waving white flags, and in some cases following an injunction from the Israeli forces to do so. The facts gathered by, so this doesn't include that particular one. Where's the Samuni one in here? Well, hold on, I can just Control F, Samuni. Under number 11. Okay, it sounds like attacks on the houses of Atrial al-Samuni. Okay, to investigate the attacks on the house of Atiya and Wael al-Samuni, which killed 23 members of the extended al-Samuni family, the mission visited the site of the incidents. It interviewed 5 members of the al-Samuni family and several of their neighbors on site, 2 members of the extended al-Samuni family who were eyewitnesses to the incident. Blah, blah, blah. The mission also interviewed PCR and ambulance drivers, obtained copies of the records. The so-called Al-Samuni area is part of border to the east by this. The Al-Samuni area is more rural than urban. Houses used to stand next to small olive and fig grows. Buildings along. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. The Israeli ground offensive from the east reached Al-Samuni neighborhood around the 4 a.m. on the 4th of January 2009. In addition to ground troops moving in from the east, there were in all likelihood heliborne troops that landed on the roofs of several houses in the area. Okay. The killing of Atria al-Samuni and his son Ahmad. During the morning of the 4th of January 2009, Israeli soldiers entered many of the houses in the Al-Samuni area. One of the first, around 5 a.m., was the house of Ataya Helmi al-Samuni, a 45-year-old man. Faraj, his 22-year-old son, had already met Israeli soldiers some minutes earlier as he stepped outside the house to warn his neighbors that their roof was burning. The soldiers entered Ataya al-Samuni's house by force, throwing some explosive device, possibly a grenade, in the midst of the smoke, fire, and loud noise. Ataya al-Samuni stepped forward, his arms raised, and declared that he was the owner of the house. The soldiers shot him while he was still holding his ID and an Israeli driver license in his hands. The soldiers then opened gunfire inside the room in which all the approximately 20 family members were gathered. Several were injured. Ahmad, a boy of 4, particularly seriously. Soldiers with night vision equipment entered the room and closely inspected each of those present. The soldiers then moved to the next room and set fire to it. The smoke from the room soon started to suffocate the family. A witness speaking to the mission recalled seeing white stuff coming out of the mouth of his 17-month-old nephew and helping him to breathe. At about 6:30 a.m., the soldiers ordered the family to leave the house. They had to leave Ataya's body behind, but were carrying Ahmed, who was still breathing. The family tried to enter the house of an uncle next door, but were not allowed to do so by the soldiers. The soldiers told them to take the road and leave the area, but a few meters further, a different group of soldiers stopped them and ordered the men to undress completely. Faraj al-Samuni, who was carrying the severely injured Ahmed, pled with them to be allowed to take the injured to Gaza. The soldiers allegedly replied using abusive language. They also said, "You are bad Arabs, you go to Nitzarim." Faraj al-Samuni, his mother, and others entered the house of an uncle in the neighborhood. From there, they called PRCS. As described below, at around 4 p.m. that day, a PRS ambulance came in and was lying wounded. Okay, I'm trying to find the attack on the house. In other cases, the entry of soldiers was less violent than the Ataya al-Samuni's home. In one instance, the soldiers landed on the roof. These real soldiers also, 100 members, majority of women. Okay. In the morning of the 5th of January 2009, around 6:30 to 7 a.m., Wael al-Samuni, Saleh al-Samuni, Hamdi Mayer al-Samuni, stepped outside the house to collect firewood. Rashad Helmi al-Samuni remained standing next to the door of the house. Saleh al-Samuni had pointed out to the mission that from where the Israeli soldiers were positioned on the roofs of the houses, they could see them in clearly. Suddenly, a projectile struck next to the 5 men, close to the door of Wael's house, and killed Muhammad, Ibrahim al-Samuni, and probably Hamdi Mayer al-Samuni. The other men managed to retreat to the house within about 5 minutes. 2 or 3 more projectiles had struck the house directly. Saleh and Wael al-Samuni stated at the public hearing that these were missiles launched from Apache helicopters. The mission had not been able to determine the type of munition used. Well, it stated that overall 21 family members were killed and 19 injured at the attacks in the house. Dead include Saleh al-Samuni's father, Taleh al-Milana, his mother, Jesus, his names, 3 of his sons. Okay, these are the family members killed. After the shelling of Wael al-Samuni's house, most of those inside decided to leave and immediately walked to Gaza City, leaving behind the dead and some of the wounded. Okay, this is just what happened.
And the soldiers' reaction was, according to Saleh al-Samuni, go back to death.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And then I'll read something else. I'll link it to you in a second. So this, I linked you to the Wikipedia article. So this is from the Wikipedia article. On 1 April 2011, Goldstone retracted his claim that was Israeli government policy to deliberately target citizens, saying, while the investigation published by the Israeli military and recognized in the UN committee's report have established the validity of some incidents that we investigated in cases involving individual soldiers, they also indicate that civilians were not intentionally targeted as a matter of policy. On 14 April 2011, the 3 other co-authors of the report, Hina Jalani, Christine Chinkin, and Desmond Travers, released a joint statement criticizing Goldstone's recantation of this aspect of the report. They all agreed that the report was valid and that Israel and Hamas had failed to investigate alleged war crimes satisfactorily. I'll link you to their statement, but the big thing here is that this is his biggest contention in his retraction. He brings this up as one of the most significant events in it. He brings it up. He provides no counter evidence. He omits critical pieces of investigations that were conducted, things that he praised right before he issued his retraction, and he gives no evidence as to why the statement he makes within the Washington Post is the ultimate statement that therefore discredits a lot of things. He never explicitly says, by the way, I detach myself entirely from all of this. It's a weak retraction, and it's used to undermine what they found in that fact-finding mission.
Wait, so in the fact-finding mission, did it say that they had deliberately targeted civilians?
It said that they
killed civilians?
It said that, well, what did we just read? Hold on. Also, here is the full statement from them, I think.
Well, yeah, I'm reading that. I see their statement. They sent a statement to the Guardian newspaper in Britain that they found it necessary to dispel any impression that subsequent developments had rendered any part of the mission's report unsubstantiated. Aspersions cast to the findings of the report cannot be left unchallenged, wrote Pakistani human rights lawyer Hina Jalani, Christine Shivan, professor of international law at the London School of Economics, and former Irish peacekeeper Desmond Travers. But yeah, wait, does this fact-finding mission in any part of the Goldstone report, does it say Israel intentionally targeted civilians?
So Goldstone, he recants that key claim in his report.
Wait. You say he recants the claim in the report. I'm asking, is there a claim in this report that Israel deliberately targeted civilians?
Yeah, that's like section 11, if you go to like the deliberate attacks on the civilian population.
And that's where the co-authors are saying, like,
sure,
yeah,
I understand that they were they were deliberate attacks against the civilian population. Like, the attacks were deliberate and they killed civilians. But the question we're asking is, like, were they deliberately targeting civilians, right? Not like, was this a result of bad intel or whatever?
Well,
but
hold on. Wait.
Yeah?
So I think the picture you're trying to draw here is, did they just attack a place that happened to have civilians, or did they know those civilians were there and did they decide to attack them? Correct?
Yeah, that's what you're claiming, the latter.
No,
yes.
what I'm claiming is that
they know that it was just civilians,
due to negligence and misconduct. They allowed an attack to go through on a place they knew had civilians in it.
Okay, hold on. To be clear,
from the investigation,
wait. I understand what you're saying, but number one, you're totally changing your claim. Because if this was your original claim, I'd probably disagree with you. There probably have been attacks that have caused civilian death where there was either negligence or bad intel or people are making bad decisions. But the whole point of this was you were saying that Israel was intentionally murdering civilians and calling it airstrikes to murder civilians.
Someone clip it and ship it, and I will post my naked butt on the subreddit if that's what I said. No, what I'm saying is that they act in such a negligent way. They put them there. They knew they were there. They put them there.
Wait, when you say
And-
put them there and knowingly put them there, that you're saying that they were knowingly murdering civilians for no reason. Not that it was a mistake.
No,
or
no, no.
negligence, they were-
When I say put them there, I'm saying they ordered these people. Hey, everyone, congregate here. You go to this house. The IDF stationed within 35 yards of that, under observation for over 24 hours. They knew they were there. They put them there. I'm saying that military is not going to come in and send a gunship that close to troops and not let them know. And that we have from the UN committee report that officers had said that they had let people know like there were civilians in the area. Like there were multiple IDF people that knew these people were there that put them there.
So then they were deliberately just shooting, airstriking civilian houses to kill civilians.
Here. So let me read. This is like toward the end. This is kind of in the conclusion. You can control F this section. This is like 1921. The mission found numerous instances of deliberate attacks on civilians and civilian objects, individuals, whole families, houses, mosques, in violation of the fundamental international humanitarian law principle of distinction, resulting in deaths and serious injuries. In these cases, the mission found that the protected status of civilians was not respected. The attacks were intentional, in clear violation of customary law reflected in articles, etc. In some cases, the mission additionally concluded that the attack was also launched with the intention of spreading terror among civilian population.
And when we started this, my whole thing was Goldstone issues the retraction that gets mentioned. You bring it up. You point it out. I say there's going to be something that I'm going to point out where Goldstone doesn't substantiate his retraction. It's one of the biggest claims within this entire Goldstone report. And that's where we're coming from here. And that just months before, he had made statements about this where he talks about the evidence that was there. He then praises two reports that come out after that further give detailed evidence about the incident. And then a month later, he issues his retraction with no substantiation about why the things that he had just praised were discredited or do not count, and that it's likely the result of this drone photo. He just says it without substantiating it. He doesn't say
the
I
drone
was.
photo was literally mentioned in the report, wasn't it? Or part of the Israeli investigation, wasn't it?
It was mentioned in the, what's it called? One second.
Like, I don't think that what Goldstone said was a retraction.
I mean, if you say it's not a retraction, then I
no,
mean, I
it was
guess there's
definitely
nothing to say
retraction.
about the report, but it was a retraction.
So if you look at just like the NPR article I sent, I'm trying to look for like the primary sources for this, but foreign minister.
To be clear, this is hold on.
Sure,
Hold
go
on.
ahead.
I can't tell if you guys are doing this intentionally or not. Okay. So this is Goldstone's paragraph. Okay, and you guys are playing really fast and loose, or at least Lycan is playing really fast and loose because now with what you're saying, if you're saying that Israel, okay, let me be clear. What are you saying? Are you saying that?
I'll say what I'm saying.
No, wait, hold on. I need to say these clearly. Are you saying that because of Dalia or whatever thing you linked earlier, that Israel has an intentional policy to murder civilians, or are you saying that Israel, through a matter of negligence, kills more civilians than it should? Which one of those two statements are you saying?
I mean, I'd say both, but right here, my point of contention is that the Goldstone report alleges that the Israelis, the IDF, intentionally targeted civilians, points to evidence of this happening, and then when you bring up that the report has been retracted, I'm like, well, let's actually dig into what he actually said as far as what a retraction is.
And it sounds
Wait.
like
Why
hold on,
were
real quick.
you?
I just want to read these two paragraphs real quick, and then you can do this, Lombards. Because you're saying that he retracted the report. It sounds like what he's doing is he's clarifying that the report did not make the statement that Israel has as a matter of policy to kill civilians.
I think
That sounds like what he's saying,
that's
which is,
accurate.
but that's not a retraction. It sounds like he's clarifying.
He retracted some of those claims. He wrote that had he known what he knows now about the Gaza war, he would have published a different document.
Okay, sorry. What were you going to say, Letterbox?
I can't tell because I think earlier when you said clip it and ship it and you'll show your butt, but weren't you referring to? Weren't you saying you didn't say that?
Well, because
Israel
Steven said
deliberately targeted
that the
civilians.
contention of what we're discussing right now was whether or not they intentionally did, and that wasn't it. It was whether or not Goldstone had actually recanted his report. That was the point of this segment of the conversation, was whether or not his recantment was actually a proper recantment, whether or not he had provided any additional information that discredits his report.
So
whether you're giving additional information, okay.
Yeah. So just to kind of validate this further, the Israeli government took this as a retraction. So Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman took credit for Goldstone's change of position, stating that his ministry sent him letters and documents that allowed Israel's
Well,
position
sure,
to
but
sink
this is
in.
what every country does, right? Whenever something happens, they're always going to try to spin it. In politics, they always try to spin it. This
But
happens
this
when they
report
negotiate
wasn't
spending
just
goals.
sure, but this report was very significant to Israel. Netanyahu, I believe, had once said the three great threats we're facing are rockets from Hamas and Hezbollah, Iran, and the Goldstone report. And this report was, a in-depth fact-finding mission corroborated by multiple organizations, the UN's power all behind it. And not only that, something important to remember is that Goldstone is a Zionist. Goldstone
Oh my
is
God.
no. This is not like some conspiracy shit. I'm giving this to his credit. This is it. Israel could not decry this man because he's a jurist with an excellent record. He is very pro-Zionism. He is proud Israeli. He is a member of significant institutions within Israel. So this is and also when the report was first discussed, it was just going to be an investigation into Israel, and Goldstone said, "Nah, fuck that. I also want to do. I want to investigate Palestine as well." So this man comes to this report of impeccable character, with very pro, Israel familial and personal ties. His daughter is done in Aliyah. He is beyond reproach as far as this investigation. He came into this with no bias, and Israel lost their shit when this report came out.
Sure,
So
so this
this
is what it
was-
sounds like, just reading these two paragraphs. The allegations of intentionality by Israel were based on the deaths and injuries to civilians in situations where our fact-finding mission had no evidence on which to draw any other reasonable conclusion, while the investigations published by the Israeli military and recognized in the UN Committee's report have established the validity of some incidents that we investigated in cases involving individual soldiers. They also indicate that civilians were not intentionally targeted as a matter of policy. And then he talks about that, the one killing the 20 members of the family. It sounds like
And
what he's
that's in
saying
his
is that, like,
that's in
it
his
sounds like what he's
retraction,
saying.
right?
I don't think this is a retraction, but it sounds like what he's saying is that some people, and it sounds like you were doing this earlier, although you're saying now you weren't. Some people are taking the Goldstone report. You were doing this earlier, because this is why you linked me to things about the Dalia or the Dahlia or whatever the fuck, right? You were making the claim that
Wait,
Israel
hold on,
has
because you just made a claim. To be clear, I said
Yeah.
in this moment, in this discussion, the point of this, the contention is that he issued a retraction that wasn't a retraction. That was
Sure.
this.
But it sounds like what he's saying is, listen.
Because I did
we
say
the
way
fact-
earlier they intentionally targeted civilians. I've never walked that back.
Sure. Okay, so he's saying that Israel doesn't have a policy of targeting civilians. And it sounds like he's saying that people read the Goldstone report, and from that, they're taking this idea that Israel has a policy of targeting civilians.
Yes,
but it sounds like he's not saying that the Goldstone report didn't justify
The conclusion of the Goldstone report was that Israel targeted civilians. Goldstone comes in and says they do not have a policy
that.
of
No,
this.
we're not.
That's a
Wait.
retraction.
Why do you keep playing? Hold on. Why do you keep? I don't know why you keep playing sweeping that. We're not talking about if Israel targeted civilians. We're talking about if Israel has a policy of deliberately targeting unarmed civilians. That's the question.
Yeah.
Not did they target civilians. That's a meaningless.
Yes,
vague
he
statement.
is saying yes. I'm saying the Goldstone report says yes. Goldstone comes out later and says no.
Yeah.
But that's a retraction. He is undermining the entire report when he says that, because that was the conclusion of the report, among many other things.
I think this is what B'Tselem said as well, because they've got an article, they're just got a piece talking about the whole report and the retraction. I think they're saying he contended that had he had access to information from the Israeli military, he would have reached different conclusions. He now states that Israel did not intentionally target civilians as a matter of policy, and that there are no grounds for believing Israel committed crimes against humanity.
Okay,
So that
would
sounds
have
like
been
he's
a
saying
much
he now states,
stronger statement. Yeah.
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 So my whole point with this, especially if
So
you're
even
going to go,
B'Tselem originally said that his conclusions weren't based on the facts presented and about the intentional policy of targeting civilians.
Wait, sorry. Can you link that, the B'Tselem article?
Yeah.
But yeah, are we on the same page that the report does say there was a policy, and then in this Washington Post article, Goldstone says that there wasn't? Is that still contentious?
I think that's what it seems to be the case.
No, I don't think the Goldstone report. They investigated 11 incidents. I don't think the Goldstone report makes the statement that there was a policy from Israel to kill unarmed civilians.
So here, I'm just going to read from the report. The operations were carefully planned in all their phases. Legal opinions and advice were given throughout the planning stages and at certain operational levels during the campaign. There were almost no mistakes made according to the government of Israel. It is in these circumstances that the mission concludes that what occurred in just over 3 weeks at the end of 2008 and beginning of 2009 was a
Wait. Where are you
deliberately.
reading this from?
This is page 408.
Wait, no. Just tell me some of the quotes you were just reading. Give me like one sentence.
The operations were carefully planned. That
The
should be okay.
operations were.
It's 1893 is like the line.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Concludes that what occurred in just over 3 weeks at the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, was a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize the civilian population, radically diminish its local economic capacity both to work and provide for itself, to force upon it an ever-increasing sense of dependency and vulnerability. So I think it seems like it's pretty direct in that the report is saying that.
To punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population implies direct murdering of civilians for no military reason?
Wait, which claim are we talking about? We're talking
That's
about
the claim you're making. It says the operation was carefully planned in all of its phases. Legal opinions and advice were given throughout the planning stages, and at certain operational levels during the campaign, there was almost no mistake made according to the governments of Israel. It is in these circumstances that the mission concludes that what occurred in just over 3 weeks at the end of 2008, the beginning of 2009, was a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population, radically diminish its local economic capacity both to work and to provide for itself, and to force upon it an ever-increasing sense of dependency and vulnerability. This is not a statement about intentionally targeting murdering civilians. This is a statement about a disproportionate attack designed to destroy like Gaza in a disproportionate way, to terrorize, humiliate, and punish the civilian population.
Let's go like through those two points, right? So there's like the softer claim of terrorizing through disproportionate attacks that I think it seems like we're on the same page with that, right? That's what it says.
Yeah.
And then there's the stronger claim about they made an attack just to terrorize, right? That would be like the further position. Is that fair?
Well, no, I think we agree that Israel probably does engage in acts to terrorize the population to some extent, right?
No, but I mean, it's like
civilian infrastructure.
So it's like if there's a building, there's a Hamas guy, and they blow up like more than they need to get that guy, or they something like that. That would be the softer claim, and the stronger claim is there's no Hamas guy, but they blow it up just to terrorize, right?
Well, that's the claim that you're making, but I don't know if that is even stated in the report.
Right. So if you go just a little bit down to line 1921, the mission found numerous instances of deliberate attacks on civilians.
Wait,
I think I maybe got in 2009. In 2009, Goldstone signed an open letter from Amnesty International that condemned the targeting of civilians.
Read 1886 and 1887.
Wait, doesn't that shut down the whole thing? If he's saying
no,
that,
because again, hold on, Learnerbox. This is the important thing, okay? It's the Israel for sure has targeted deliberately places that have civilians, right? Okay, hold on. I feel like I'm getting gaslit by so many people right now. Okay, we know this is true. Nobody can deny this. Okay. The question isn't has Israel deliberately targeted and killed civilians. The question is are they knowingly, deliberately targeting civilians and killing them as a matter of policy? That's the question. So, for instance, that the drone, supposedly the bad drone footage for this Al Shamouni house or whatever, right? In that case, Israel deliberately targeted a house and killed at least 29 family members. We know that. But the question is, was it a policy of deliberately killing civilians, or was it through like gross negligence or in this case, it would have been gross negligence or bad intel or some fuck up. That's the question. Because the claim being made, I don't know why people keep dancing around it. The claim being made, truly, is that Israel, as a matter of policy, wants to deliberately target and kill civilians with no military objectives defined. That's the goal that's the Israeli military policy.
Okay, so I would strongly push back on this characterization that everybody agrees that Israel is using disproportionate warfare to terrorize. That's like extremely contentious. Yeah.
I don't think that's contentious at all. With any history of reading, no, Israel has literally explicitly said it. They've said it in the Samu incident. They've said it in every time Israel goes across the border and fight. They said it in Lebanon that we need to go and fuck them up so hard that they do not come back on us. We know it's disproportionate. Anybody that says otherwise is delusional. They're insanely pro-Zionist. Yes, I consider it a settled historical fact. Yes, that Israel will intentionally go and sometimes destroy villages and shit. It happened in the Kafir massacre, and there's a million other things they do. So that's that's not a matter of question, right? That has happened in the past. That's not a matter of question.
Okay, great.
Right?
That's great.
But the
because,
question is, especially in the past 20 years, is Israel intentionally targeting and killing civilians, knowingly killing civilians, that there are civilians there with no military justification? That's the question. That's the claim that's being made, although some people keep walking around whether that's what they're saying. That's the question.
So so just to again iterate. First, one, yes, I support what the Goldstone report says, that they had a policy where the IDF was instructed to target civilians. Yes. In that moment where I said that's not the contention, just to be clear again, it was what were we talking about at that moment? It was whether or not Goldstone issued a retraction. That was the point of contention in that moment. So I just want to be very explicit, and I haven't been wishy-washy on any of this. Read 1886, 1887, and 1890. If you want to read 88 and 89 in between, that's perfectly fine.
1886. In this respect, the mission recognizes that not all deaths constitute violations of international humanitarian law. The principle of proportionality acknowledges that under certain strict conditions, action resulting in the loss of civilian life may not be unlawful. What makes the application and assessment of proportionality difficult in respect of many of the events investigated by the mission is that deeds by the Israeli armed forces and words of military and political leaders prior to and during the operations indicate that, as a whole, they were premised on a deliberate policy of disproportionate force aimed not at the enemy but at the supporting infrastructure. In practice, this appears to have meant the civilian population. The timings of the first Israeli attack at 11:30 a.m. on a weekday, when children were returning from school and the streets of Gaza were crowded with people going about their daily business, appears to have been calculated to create the greatest disruption and widespread panic among the civilian population. The treatment of many civilians detained or even killed while trying to surrender is one manifestation. The way in which the effective rules of engagement, standard operating procedures, and instructions to the troops on the ground appear to have been framed in order to create an environment in which due regard for civilian lives and basic human dignity was replaced with disregard for basic international humanitarian law and human rights norms. The mission recognizes fully that the Israeli armed forces, like any army attempting to act within the parameters of international law, must avoid taking undue risks with their soldiers' lives, but neither can they transfer that risk onto the lives of civilian men, women, and children. The fundamental principles of distinction and proportionality apply on the battlefield, whether that battlefield is a built-up urban area or an open field. How many more of these do you want to read?
Just one more, I think.
1890.
The repeated failure to distinguish between combatants and civilians appears to the mission to have been the result of deliberate guidance issued to soldiers as described by some of them and not the result of occasional lapses. Do you want me to read more?
I think that's it, right? Because that appears to be saying pretty strongly that this was, deliberate guidance issued to soldiers, not the result of occasional lapses.
Okay.
I mean, how do you feel about that?
I don't think any of this is making the argument that you think it's making, but I understand why you read it that way, and I don't think we're ever going to come to an agreement.
Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't read 1890. The mission recognizes that some of those killed were combatants
directly engaged in hostilities against Israel, but many were not. The outcome and the modalities of the operations indicate, in the mission's view, that they were only partially aimed at killing leaders and members of Hamas, Al-Qassam brigades, and other armed groups. They were also, to a large degree, aimed at destroying or incapacitating civilian property and the means of subsistence of the civilian population.
Yeah, like I mean, what I take away from this is that the policy of them in this operation was to kill civilians and damage civilian property, as well as take out Hamas. I mean, the pretext for the invasion was a violation of a ceasefire agreement that they knowingly did. Without any kind of substantiated, necessary threat that needed to be taken out, then they incur the response. Can
I answer just one question on this?
Mm-hmm.
If this was the intentional policy of Israel, why wasn't the loss of civilian life so much higher? Why would they waste missiles on like a civilian house?
Because they can't just go waylay entirely. I mean, if they make it too explicit, if you make me phrase it that way, it sounds conspiracy. But I mean, the reality is they know this. There are policies after this where they're like, okay, what we did to, engage this policy to subdue these people, to inflict terror, to try to prevent this to never happen again. We realized that, this put a spotlight on this, and they were terrified of a second Goldstone report and following
Yeah, but you're talking about
operations.
Like in your world, they're intentionally calling in missile strikes to civilian houses, and they're leaving the civilian population alive in the surrounding area to report on this.
Because they're not trying to, at least in this point, they're not trying to just massacre as many civilians as possible.
Well,
but
but
they
that's
are
what
trying
you're
to.
saying. That is what they're trying to do.
No, I'm saying they intentionally targeted them and they wanted to terrorize them. I'm not saying they wanted, to wipe out the entire population. The question ultimately was whether or not they did this at all, and the answer is yes. And now we see 10,800 dead in Gaza.
Hold on. You keep changing the argument. The question is not if it ever happened at all. That's not what's being contended here. The question was whether it was a matter of Israeli military policy. That was the initial argument that you made. If you wanted to
Yes.
say, has it happened?
No, but you
everybody here
contended
agrees that it has happened.
You
Everybody
contended.
agrees it has happened.
You fought back on that point by saying, why didn't more die? And that's not the point. The point is whether or
because
not
if
it
your
happened.
argument is that no, it's not. That was never the point. We all of us know here that the IDF has killed people that there was no good justification for. The question is whether it's a matter of military policy to inflict as much like damage on the civilian population in terms of murdering civilians as possible, no military justification. That was the initial point for all of this,
Wait.
not just.
So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. When it comes to destroying civilian infrastructure, that the attempt to destroy as much as possible does seem to be there. I can justify that more if you want, but then to the other one.
No, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's our stated goal. Yes.
And then on the question of killing civilians, this is saying, so like 1889 is saying that this is deliberate guidance, but it's to terrorize, it's to kill some number of, to target civilians sometimes to terrorize. I don't think this is saying an attempt to literally just like murder every single Palestinian.
That's why anytime like the indiscriminate bombing, which I think is also covered in this from this report, indiscriminate bombing is never measured by whether or not a certain threshold of civilians have been met per bomb dropped. It's a matter of whether or not it's disproportionate force and indiscriminately used.
Like, and just to, I think Destiny is especially concerned with looking at this specifically only targeting civilians. So not the disproportionate, but like specifically only targeting civilians.
Right. And
Is
which
that
I am saying, like, that's a claim I absolutely make and I support through the Goldstone report.
So
like the question of why didn't they kill more, that's not really a refutation. The point is that they found evidence they did intentionally target civilians and that it was a matter of policy to terrorize them.
Yeah. Okay. I understand. We're running in circles, but.
Well,
None of this has shown that there is a policy from Israel to murder civilians with no military justification.
So
none of that has been established. Recklessness, absolutely. That point you gave me, a failure to distinguish between or make good faith effort to distinguish between combatants and civilians does appears to have been neglected. That all of this is true, but I don't think I would have opposed. I don't think I would have disagreed with any of this. The question was whether like the initial framing that you gave, and I think you're pretending that you didn't give this framing now. Now you're walking it to a more reasonable position that I think I would have agreed right at the start. The initial framing given was the IDF calls in and says, hey, we've got a house. We put 29 civilians in there. And the commander goes, okay, well, what's that? Yeah, that is exactly what you claimed.
No,
and
I said they knew.
And the guy says, okay, that's correct. There are 29 civilians in there. We're going to go ahead and order an airstrike to kill those 29 civilians. And then the IDF was like, correct. We're 35 yards away. We're watching the house. We see them. We've talked to them. We know they're civilians. Go ahead. You're clear to blow that house up and kill the civilians. That is the initial, that is still your position. Although you keep kind of just like, that's the impression that you're giving. That's far different than every other claim you've made, which is, well, sometimes they don't distinguish while they're trying to terrorize. Well, they, gross negligence while they're interpreting photos wrong. You're giving the impression that they're like, we moved 100 civilians into this house. Then we called in an airstrike on that house to kill the civilians. That's the claim that you made. Is that not the claim that you're making? Am I misunderstanding that? Because I know we can go back in the VOD and say, because all the supporting arguments you were given, you gave all the arguments. You said they had talked to the people. They were 35 yards away. They forced them to go into that house. And then an airstrike was called in for no reason. All the arguments you're giving is that they are knowingly putting civilians in houses and then knowingly calling in airstrikes to kill civilians. That's
I'm claiming both.
Saying.
They're not mutually exclusive. The initial
but that's the
contention was
stronger
about
claim, right?
The initial contention was about the Goldstone report being retracted, and it was disproving that no actual meaningful retraction was given. That was the main contention when we got into this.
Okay.
So just to answer directly, so specifically targeting civilians. So again, if you look at, just scroll down, like it's like 2 pages to 1921. This is directly saying instances of deliberate attacks on civilians, and then in that same paragraph, in some cases, the mission additionally concluded that the attack was also launched with the intention of spreading terror. So my reading, maybe I am dyslexic, maybe I'm not reading this correctly, but it looks like they're targeting civilians and in some cases doing it to spread terror. It doesn't say that they're trying to kill literally everyone, but that there are cases.
Wait, what was that quote again, real quick?
1921.
What's a good?
Oh, this is the top one here. Yes.
Yeah. Incidents involving the killing of civilians. Yeah. So I'm connecting this to the previous paragraphs where it's saying that this is part of policy. Maybe that's not a fair reading. I haven't read the Goldstone report, so I need to do like an actual full read of this.
Sure. I feel like in a report like this, like where modern day, the language is like pretty clear. I don't think we would have to draw inferences for any of this. Like, I think that they would say very clearly, like, the mission finds that as a deliberate matter of policy, like, Israeli soldiers or IDF soldiers were like murdering civilians knowing there was no military target present. Like, that would be very clear language that would be enshrined in a report like this.
So what do you make of the sentence? In some cases, the mission additionally concluded that the attack was also launched with the intention of spreading terror among the civilian population.
We know that there was terror spread when we're talking about like bombing like houses or blowing up power plants or whatever. We
It
know
says
that that's part of
civilians,
it.
so it says
Yeah.
individuals,
Yes.
whole families. Yeah.
Yes, for civilian population, right?
Yeah.
But they wouldn't say, like in a report like this, you wouldn't say spreading terror among the civilian population when what you're talking about is the deliberate murdering of civilians. You would say that in clear language. It wouldn't be something you would infer from like terror attacks, because we agree that like spreading terror can mean like blowing up houses, blowing up hospitals, blowing up power plants, attacking water desalination plants, whatever, right?
Well, wait, but it says houses, but it says individuals, families. I feel like you're parsing this. Like I don't know what UN articles are typically written in. I haven't read a lot of these. It's not my field of expertise. But I feel like you're parsing this to say that they would have said that exact sentence. I'm not even sure exactly what's missing from this that would make that.
Well,
that
it's even,
difference
you see it in the B'Tselem report as well, where they're making a distinction between targeting as a matter of policy. It seems to be that that's clearly like a different thing, right?
Yeah, it is obviously a different thing, right? Like, and I don't like the conflating of the two, because, for instance, when Hamas comes into Israel, like on October 7th, their goal is not to just like, we've got to kill everybody because anybody could be a soldier, or like, we're just going to bomb this fucking city and I think soldiers are there. Or we're gonna, they're like clearly going to areas, hunting explicitly for civilians. They're capturing, raping, killing, murdering, and they're explicitly, like deliberately doing that.
Yep.
But you guys are equating, and I think it was even said earlier, that this is a matter of policy for both sides. The IDF does this, and
I didn't say that at all. No.
Okay, sure, but that the IDF, this is the general claim, this is the arguments that at least Lycan is generally making, that both sides basically do this type of thing. But I think that while we can agree that the IDF engages in disproportionate reprisals, while we can agree that the IDF engages in a matter of like trying to, what do they call it, shared punishment or whatever for the population, that there is undue care for civilian deaths, that sometimes they're not distinguishing between combatant, like militants and civilians. These are all really bad things. Some of these things are a violation of international law. Some of these things should have military tribunals or charges attached, which is why there was an investigation for that family being destroyed, that family's house being destroyed. But that is a fundamentally different thing than as a matter of policy, we're trying to explicitly target and murder civilians. These two statements are very different. Yeah.
When I see failure to distinguish, I imagine just what's happening in these when people are giving coordinates for attacks is they're probably going off of like evidence that like not very great intelligence or not fully confirmed intelligence, or they're targeting infrastructure. But I think that's a bit different from like they give these coordinates to a pilot and they're like, go strike this target here, and the person says, well, there's like this is just a civilian house. There's no Hamas. There's nothing. It's just a family lives there, and then the general's like.
And it does sound like, and it does
That's-
sound like in this fact-finding mission in the report, it sounds like it does outline times where there are individual soldiers that are just shooting and killing civilians. Because I think it mentioned in here that there were like civilians walking back, or were they waving flags? Were they getting shot, or were they just insulting them when they were waving the flags? Actually, maybe I'm gonna say that. But like, yeah, they're definitely. As long as group of civilians is concerned, the shooting of civilians where they were trying to leave their homes to walk to a safer place, waving white flags, and in some cases following an injunction from the Israeli forces to do so, like that would be an example of like you're just like deliberately shooting and killing civilians. But that's different than like the bombing of the house, where there might have been like a misinterpreted picture and then there was a lot of negligence involved. These are fundamentally different things.
So I want to make a few things really clear, because we've talked the whole gamut of things from indiscriminate bombings to targeted attacks to disregard for proportionality when attacking a target that may have some military justification, but civilians are nearby. So to be really clear, well, first of all, Stephen, do I not always come to you? Did I not, even after that first conversation, come back to you and say, hey, I think I might have been wrong about the involvement of American funding on the military? That first in-person conversation, did I not, as soon as you got off stream, said, hey,
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
okay.
sure.
So there's no expectation that, or a precedent for me not being willing to concede. So I just want to make that clear. So then to be further clear, I've made both claims. I've claimed that as a matter of policy, they have had disregard and intentionally targeted civilians, and that they, through indiscriminate bombing, cause disproportionate death and destruction to the civilian population and civilian structures. So I do state both, claim both, never denied both. in 1922, and I think maybe this speaks a little bit in the area of what Lonerbox was just saying. With regard to one incident investigated involving
Wait,
the
in
death
19. Wait, what?
1922. I'm reading 1922.
Wait, wait,
off of-
wait, wait. Why are we jumping like 90
No, it's
years?
1922 of the
line
paper. The
line
Goldstone,
1922.
right? Yeah.
I was confused
Oh,
there.
sorry. Okay, my bad. Hold on.
No, it's okay. Also, you know, these, and I just also want to be clear, like those two aren't mutually exclusive, right? Like the IDF knows that, you know, certain areas are heavily civilian populated. You know, there's going to be overlap in like the disproportionate use of certain weapons, but also in the disregard for, you know, knowing civilians are within the area or with a certain target. You know, they both kind of overlap there. But anyway, sorry, not year 1922, but 1922
Also,
in the
just
report.
real quick, I disagree that there's an overlap there. These are two very clearly different types of things. Both can be bad, but there's a difference between the deliberate targeting and murdering of civilians versus just like, fuck it, there's probably militants in this area, we're just gonna bomb the whole city, and like 95% of your deaths are civilians.
How is that different? I mean, if you there's one of the reasons that you know, we raid weapons
Wait,
caches.
you don't acknowledge that there's a difference between those two things?
There can be a difference, but they can overlap, and that's what I'm arguing.
Wait, so I'm gonna make the strong case because I feel like Destiny, you're losing your mind here. Line 1921, it says this like every line. It says this over and over and over again that they're intentionally targeting civilians. Like maybe I'm missing how
Yeah,
you
the intentionally targeting civilians means that it's not like a missile is like landing in a random place and civilians are dying. Israel is intentionally, with precision, striking areas that have civilians. That's what intentionally targeting civilians means like. But it doesn't mean deliberately targeting non-militant people.
It says
Those
deliberate
are two...
attacks on civilians. I'm not sure what I'm missing here that you're parsing that I'm missing.
Okay, maybe I'll find like some like UN reports on like other types of attacks or whatever. But the wording that I see is not
intentional, deliberate attacks.
No,
on civilians,
it's not just intentional attacks. It's like deliberate policy of like aiming for and killing non-militants, like deliberately trying to murder civilians.
It can be a policy. So again, it can be a policy of just reckless disregard. We're going to drop these type of shells that do a certain amount of damage, and we're not really accounting for anything around there. And then there is knowingly intending to do that kind of bombing against a target and knowing that it is going to cause those civilian casualties.
Yeah, those are two different things. Both are bad, right? We agree with that. They're both bad, arguably horrible, depending on the loss of life. But I think they're different.
So to me, I'm reading this, and I'm seeing that they're saying there's deliberate attacks on civilians, in some cases in order to spread terror among the civilian population. So to me, that's the act, and that's the motivation.
Okay, listen, if you want, after the 21st, because I didn't know that the entirety of this conversation was going to focus on literally just this one event, this Operation Cast Iron. I can try and read through some of the reports and the back and forth on this, because I'm literally just reading as you're sending it. I don't have like the background to. I didn't know that this 3-hour combo was going to be in this one event, and that's what we're going to focus on. Yeah. But I mean, I can try to like gather more and have like a more fleshed out opinion of like what were the conclusions of this report, what was being said or whatever. But I guess I can try to do that after my Ben Shapiro debate. But because I know that because some people, I've gotten a bunch of emails, people are saying there are responses to this. For instance, the fact-finding mission apparently only incorporates like Palestinian testimony, that Israel didn't participate in this whatsoever. So every single report of a soldier said this or a Palestinian saw this or whatever, all of this is only from the perspective of people that are on the ground there as well, including Hamas, including the Palestinian Authority or whatever. I don't know if that invalidates anything. I don't know if that matters. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it would largely synergize with the Israeli report. Maybe the Israeli counter-response includes nothing that gets rid of any of this at all. I don't know. But like, yeah, I'm not familiar with this one. I don't know. It was just, we were going to talk about this one report for 3 hours. I'm definitely not like this is not what I've like studied for 2 days. Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of.
Because I think he was saying if he had access to information from the Israeli military, he would have reached different conclusions. Because I guess that's why. Because if you know why the Israeli military is doing what they're doing, then you probably see whether or not there was the intent to target civilians as policy or not, right?
If you saw, whatever it was, I don't know what kind of messaging apps they use in the field, but if you saw those messages back and forth, and it was clear that everybody thought they were hitting a military target, and then they thought the intel was better than it was. Like, if you could see that, then that, maybe it change his mind, right? So, from one perspective, it's seeing, Goldstone got more information, so he recants, and then the other side is saying he was pressured. And I think he's an Israeli citizen. He lives within Israel.
His family was
Is
there
that
were certain things like he wasn't going to be able to go to like someone's wedding or funeral or some
yeah?
shit, and there were other things. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's a huge fucking report. I don't know if
Hmm.
you know you'd read it all, but um,
Have you read the entirety or the majority of most of these reports, or this report and this counter report?
oh no, absolutely not. I've read a lot from it. I've not read all 600 pages or whatever it is.
Okay.
So, but it's been like I see a claim, I then go to the report, and I look for all mentions of that claim, and then like summaries, conclusion.
Sure, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here parsing this in real time. I've never read the report directly before.
Yeah. I think something else I wanted to talk about. We don't have to today, but I mean, I wanted to get into like the government thing. Again, I don't know if this is going to come up with Shapiro, but the blockade started by Israel, backed by the U.S. and the EU, tightened down after the election, which was again encouraged by America, and then overseen by America and ruled fair and free and all that jazz. Then the illegal blockade gets tightened. The impact it had on the economy, the impact it had on the government and internal turmoil, the coup of the Fatah, and all that shit leading to
Wait, what are you
yeah.
talking about right now? What about the blockade?
Oh, the blockade, like the illegal blockade, how they did it after the election, the impact it had on Gaza. Like those are big things that have culminated in a lot of turmoil and strife.
Wait, why do you think the blockade happened?
The blockade happened after Hamas was elected to parliament.
Was it after they were
Well,
elected,
it
or
was
was it
after they
after they
seized
kicked
control.
out of all the opposing parties?
Let me check
It was
the
after
dates
they
because
seized
I
control.
hold on.
Pretty sure.
What date? Gaza blockade 2007, and then Hamas coup 2007. Battle of Gaza was June to June 15th, and the blockade was
Winter,
also
no?
June,
All right.
which was see if it gives an exact date. Yep, it was after Hamas had seized control.
Okay.
But
Just as a real quick thing, do
Mhm.
you understand that the two statements are wildly different in interpretation? Because
what
the
as
one that you
far
just said
as
was that you said that they put a blockade up under Hamas won elections fair and square, which made it sound like Israel was just putting a blockade up because they hated the will of the Palestinian people. But that's a lot different than they put a blockade up after the terrorist party that had already been like launching attacks not only was elected, but then they ousted all of the other political opposition
it
in the
doesn't
Gaza
change
Strip.
the legality of the blockade.
Sure, but to every other person listening, to the moral authority or whatever, is going to be dramatically different.
Sure,
here,
and you can
right?
say that, but then when you look at the history as it goes forward, when you look at the maintenance of the ceasefire up until Israel broke it in 2008, when you look at words of Mishal, the Hamas leader, agreements in 2014 to form a unity government with the Fatah party, to acknowledge Israel, to renounce violence, to what's it called, to follow all prior agreements and all that stuff.
Well, what happened after 2014 when they renounced violence?
2014 is well. I mean, after that happened, Operation Protective Edge was started.
What was the point of Operation Protective Edge?
Let's see. The Protective Edge. Let me make sure I get my
Like, what was the impetus to that, or
history
what was
right.
the?
I think it was. Now let me say I think because I want to make sure I'm getting everything right. Let's see. I think okay. So in 2014, I think it was the kidnapping of the 3 Israelis, but that was
Okay.
done by 2 members of the Kawasame clan, if I'm getting my order of operations correct. So
Which was part of. They
so
existed in
they
the Gaza
were
Strip?
yeah. So these were
Okay.
yeah. So these were Hamas members, but they were from a faction that was not under the main primary whatever, and they had a history of doing shit against proper Hamas. When asked about it,
Hang on. When
yep,
um,
Hamas did not claim
what's your claim
responsibility.
about the connection between the unity government and Operation Protective Edge? What's your claim about the connection between
My,
those two?
my claim is that they were once again making a step towards peace, and then once again, Israel capitalized on an opportunity to disrupt the peace process.
Didn't the unity government get dissolved before protective edge started.
No, dissolved in 2015.
Okay.
So, so they do Brothers Keeper, Operation Brothers Keeper. There is the belief, and I won't cite it definitively, that they knew when they were engaging in the search and rescue mission that the brothers had already, or the, I don't know if they were brothers, the Israeli boys had already been killed. They go through, they do some arrests, a few people die, whatever. And then I think, oh, but anyway, either way, the kidnapping was not the cause, was not condoned by Hamas leadership. It was not funded by Hamas leadership. It was by two people, again, from a clan that was known for, doing other shit. And throughout this entire period of history, from like 2006 or 7 to 2014, there are always other factions, whether it's competing Islamist groups or other sects of Hamas, because Hamas isn't a monolith, that acted against Hamas. And there are multiple instances of Hamas trying to enforce like the ceasefire, saying knock it off, trying to hold others accountable and maintain the peace. So at that point, they formed the unity government. They are saying, hey, we're going to acknowledge Israel, do all this other shit. America is taking the approach of, okay, let's see what you guys can do. America agrees to like talk with them, work with them. Netanyahu is pissed off at, what's it called? Netanyahu is pissed off that America is working with Iran as well. And then the kidnapping happens. Hamas leadership says, we didn't fucking do this. But that said, hey, you know what? If they kidnap these boys, let's get some people back. They want to do a prisoner swap. That's fine with us. But we didn't coordinate this. We didn't condone this. And so then a little history, I think in 88, 89, 87, whenever Tiananmen Square was, I think there's a report that allegedly that Netanyahu had said that not using the distraction of the world for the Tiananmen Square incident as a reason to oust hundreds of thousands of problematic Palestinian prominent figures from the West Bank was a mistaken opportunity. And so then when the airline gets shot down over Ukraine, the Malaysian airline, they launch the invasion and do protective edge. And that further, stops the peace process, undoes a bunch of goodwill that had been established. And the point of that, without going into the operation itself, is that there were multiple times where Hamas signaled a willingness to work with the Palestinian Authority, to work with Israel, to work with UN, EU, United Nations, Israel, US, whatever. And those were undermined. So if you don't look into that and you don't end up talking to Shapiro about that, that's fine. But when you come back, we can dive deep into that. And I'll make sure to have all links.
So you're saying for
available.
these 3 Israeli teenagers, you're saying Hamas had nothing to do with this?
Correct. As in Hamas proper did not coordinate,
Sure.
condone, or fund the attack.
Okay. I haven't like looked into this particular ordeal at all. I'm just reading off paragraphs here. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank attributed the abductions to the Kawasame clan, which I think is who you were talking about, notorious for acting against Hamas's policies and any attempts to reach an intent with Israel. Hamas political chief Khaled Meshal said he could neither confirm nor deny the kidnappings of the 3 Israelis, but congratulated the abductors. The kidnappings were condemned by human rights organizations. Documents released by Israel suggested that Hamas member Hussam Kawasme organized the kidnappings with $60,000 provided by his brother Mahmoud through a Hamas association in Gaza after requesting support for a military operation. On the 20th of August, Saleh al-Oruri, an exiled Hamas leader based in Turkey, claimed responsibility for the kidnappings of the 3 Israeli teens with the quote, "Our goal was to ignite an intifada in the West Bank of Jerusalem as well as within the 1948 borders. Your brothers in the Al-Qassam brigades carried out this operation to support their imprisoned brothers who were on a hunger strike. The Mujahideen captured these settlers in order to have a swap deal." End quote. Palestinian security forces said the kidnappings were organized by Saleh al-Aruri, and then Khaled Meshal, head in exile of Hamas's political wing since 2004, acknowledged that Hamas members were responsible, but stated that its political leaders had no prior knowledge of the abduction, were not involved in military details, and learned of it through the ensuing Israeli investigations. He also said that while Hamas was opposed to targeting civilians, he understood that Palestinians frustrated with oppression were exercising a legitimate right of resistance against the occupation by undertaking such operations. Is it true? Do we feel very strongly that Hamas had nothing to do with it, or?
The Hamas proper? Yeah.
Okay.
There are multiple instances of Israel, like, kind of blaming Hamas proper, when Hamas has, for the most part, had no issue taking responsibility for attacks and abductions and all that shit. I wanted to go kind of historically from 2007 to 2014 and talk through all of that. But the point being that there are multiple instances where Hamas has been willing to accept a two-state solution, to acknowledge Israel, to work towards peace, to maintain ceasefires, to police other, Islamist organizations, and other instances where Israel has worked to undermine those.
Okay. As a
2005.
real quick, in 2014, a senior Hamas leader said that the group did carry out the kidnappings and killings of 3 Israeli teens in the West Bank in June, the first time anyone from the Islamic militant group had said that it was behind an attack that helped spark the current war in the Gaza Strip. Saleh Arori told a conference in Turkey on Wednesday that Hamas's military wing, the Al-Qassam Brigades, carried out what he described as a heroic operation with the broader goal of sparking a new Palestinian uprising. This is, I guess, what was quoted, but maybe he's lying, I guess we're saying, or I don't know if
I
he's
think he
still in
also
Hamas
said
leadership.
our goal was to ignite an intifada in the
Yeah,
West Bank
another
and
intifada.
Jerusalem.
Yeah,
as
he
well
claimed
as
that. Yeah, but other evidence points to the contrary.
Whatever evidence.
Other statements from other members.
The statements were at the time some Hamas leadership wasn't aware of it, or?
No, I mean that's only in the Wikipedia article. I'll find more on this.
Well, no, I just linked the NPR story where he says there was the guy admitted.
Yeah,
to
yeah, that
kidnapping.
guy says it. Yeah, but I'm saying that everything I've read is that the majority of the leadership are saying, "No, we had nothing to do with this." I mean, think about there are times where Al Qaeda or ISIS or someone else has conducted an attack, and then there are a bunch of people scrambling to take credit. I want to admit to it. I don't want to admit to it. Whatever. Someone gets blamed. They deny. Then it turns out they did. But the majority of everything I've read on this is that Hamas proper was not responsible for this attack.
Okay. Arari is one of Hamas's most senior figures. He founded Hamas's military wing in the West Bank 2 decades ago and now commands the group's operations in the area from exile in Turkey. He was deported several years ago on a deal that freed him from Israeli prison. Maybe he's just lying, I guess, but...
I mean, he's not really backed by evidence. It sounds like an opportunistic claim.
Well, what evidence
What
would
would
he...
be the
Yeah.
Opportunistic claim is to, I mean, he's speaking at a conference, so it's like, hey, brothers, we did this.
But I thought they were trying to push the image that they were trying to be reconciliatory with PA, no? That
And they
trying to
were.
change
And
their positions.
through actions and deeds, they were.
Apart from the
So in the
kidnappings,
middle of
which they
that,
took
in
credit
the
for.
middle of unprecedented relations with the United States and all that, they're going to go ahead and just say, yeah, no, never mind, fuck it.
All right. Well, any other things or?
No, I think I just want to state plainly, since we have never really gotten to this, I support a two-state solution. Understanding of Hamas, the political situations between Israel and Hamas, understanding the legalities of what both Hamas and the IDF does. None of that is ever to carry water for, bad things that Hamas has done, just as, defense of Israel as they work to take out the threat of Hamas is not a defense of IDF actions. So I think that gets pretty muddied up because no one really, I guess, digs too deep into these things. And they just see it as Hamas bad terrorist organization. Why would you ever try to, talk deeper about what they do or what they've said?
Okay. All right. Well, I have to leave pretty soon because I need to catch a flight kind of soonish. Did anybody in here want to bring anything else up?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
if
good.
I had just like a final statement, it would be to reiterate that if we have issues with the way Hamas or Arab countries operate, and we think that that's like not up to the civilized standards of the Western world, but then we see Israel doing some of those things, then we should think about, well, why are we supporting Israel, right? Because we're not treating them equally to these other nations. So that's the one thing I would say to pay attention to.
Sure.
I would
We
wanna
also
know-
agree
'cause
that
I-
like Hamas and the PA like have zero accountability as well, right?
Sure.
For,
Yeah.
Yeah. That nobody holds them
But we
accountable
don't.
for anything.
But we don't give them billions of dollars for military aid. That's my point.
What was the U.S. contribution to the Gaza Strip? Was it 300 million a year?
Sure, but not for military.
Well,
Or
I haven't
not-
found, and I mean this.
Not
I said
explicitly,
this
not
is-
intentionally. Anyway.
not
I've
explicitly intentionally, but yeah.
I said this is an open call. I haven't seen. I've been trying to find. I've been using like ChatGPT-4 now and shit. I'm trying to find like any kind of evidence as far as to how much funding is skimmed.
Like,
Well,
what
you
off
can't
of the
know
top
how much
share.
funding is going to be skimmed, right? Because it's Hamas is what runs the. They would have to publish those reports. Like, this is how much we spend on terrorism, right? They're not going
What
to
I
say
would wonder is whilst Hamas were publicly taking two-state solution and renouncing violence and all that, I wonder. I haven't looked that hard into those incidents because I tend not to take Hamas at their word ever. But like I would feel a bit odd that they were saying that. Meanwhile, I'd want to know, were their backers changing their position? Like, because I think 2011, I think Iran were still very much no more Israel or no two-state
Iran
solution.
Iran backed
Or
off
other people who
after
back Hamas.
Hamas sided with, I can't remember which one in Syria, but it's the one that Iran didn't like. Iran stopped support for a significant amount of time and only recently resumed support for them.
For resume support for Hamas.
Hamas.
Who were their backers in 2011, 2012, 13, 14?
It was whenever the Syria shit happened is when they stopped backing them.
No, when did I'm asking who was
I'm sorry, when
supporting Hamas
Iran
financially.
stopped backing Hamas was whenever Hamas sided with the opposition to Syria or opposition to Iran in Syria.
So who was
I think
supporting
that was
Hamas
around-
in 2014?
Hold on. Iran downgraded relations with Hamas in 2013 after it realigned with Syrian strongman and Iranian. Oh, where's this fucking thing? But it was 2013.
So where was and Hamas's reconciliation with Fatah started in what, like 2011?
I know that it was 2014 when
When they formed the unity
when
government,
when
right?
that unity government was formed.
So who were Hamas's backers when they were forming the unity government?
I do not know.
So I know there was the I can't remember what year this was, but there was the 15 million in like suitcases that
Did that Hamas fucker smuggled in?
no
The
no no
24
that Netanyahu brought in to
yeah.
Gaza to Hamas, which when you look at it, like his reasoning is like not bad, because he was seeing that all these government officials were not being paid, and he was like, let's get them paid so that they don't get paid by somebody else. But then that money ended up getting funneled to Hamas, I guess. So it was maybe a mistake, but that's when you look at Netanyahu's decisions, that's a humanitarian one, at least.
No, we could go on for hours about
Right.
this.
Anything
I'd be happy
else?
to, but yeah.
Wait, it says beginning of 2014, Hamas and Iran rebuild ties after falling out over Syria. So they fell out over Syria 2011, right? But so when that unity government was formed, Iran and Hamas had rebuilt ties.
Did they? 2014?
It's to the guard, yeah,
Because
January.
I found an
9th,
article
2014.
that said like 2021 that Hamas and Iran had rebuilt ties. So I might have read about an article on that.
There might have been a gap, but so yeah, but it seems to be at the time of the unity government, Hamas and Iran had rebuilt ties after falling out over Syria. So I would wonder if Hamas are saying we're two states and peace with Israel and all that, but then their big backer is saying the opposite. I feel like that would be a bit suspicious, no?
Yeah. I mean, I'd still say at the end of the day, the different points between 2007, 2014, where the Hamas government in Gaza was trying to either do right by the people or try to bring some semblance of peace. Things were undermined. Like the
Do you think? Can I ask a question about the Goldstone report? Okay, hold on, because now, fuck me, dude. This is gonna have to be like, I'm gonna have to spend 2 days reading each of these like 400-page things. Is it not a little bit strange that the Goldstone report doesn't incorporate any Israeli intelligence?
was any provided? Is there anything in there that mentions attempts to
Israel said
gather?
that they didn't want to partake in the commission.
Oh, well, that.
But doesn't that severe? So, for instance, I'm just somebody linked me a collection of like apparently.
I mean,
there's 12 essays
if the
that were written. I'm
Goldstone
just
report
reading,
was
just reading this one paragraph, then you can respond. Okay. The Goldstone report's primary conclusion is that the Israeli armed forces committed deliberate attacks against civilians and the civilian population of Gaza because it could not ascertain any grounds which could have reasonably induced them to assume the civilians attacked were in fact taking a direct part in the hostilities and had thus lost their immunity against direct attacks. As in, the proportionality analysis above As in the proportionality analysis above, however, the report makes this conclusion without any information from the Israeli commanders launching the attacks and, as a result, on the basis of retrospective information rather than that available at the time of the attack. Both features of the analysis lead to an unnecessary broadening of the mens rea for the crime of unlawful attack, indeed, to an effective elimination of the mens rea element. Isn't it kind of strange that like you would do a report on this, you would make the statements as strong as you are, and the only thing that you have for this report are statements from like essentially Palestinians on the ground about what happened?
I would say, this would be my final thought on it. I would say that with the amount of damage that that report was doing to Israel, with the significance of it within Israel, that if they had counter information, if us, the United States, with our relations, when Congress almost unanimously voted to condemn the report, that information would have been furnished and provided to discredit it, but nothing was provided.
Well, but now we do have at least some information about one of the events relating to the house that was struck, that there were apparently pictures of a drone or shitty pictures from a drone that made it look like there were rocket launchers or whatever.
Nothing actually furnished, though, right?
Yeah, so we don't know.
The word of the IDF.
Sure, that's fine, but I'm just saying that, like, let's say, like, Israel should have participated, right? And it might have its reasons not to, because obviously Israel has their feelings about the UN and everything, right? But doesn't that severely hamper the strength of the statement? You're saying, like, wouldn't that caution you between making certain statements? Like, couldn't I argue that every single attack almost seems to be the case, that there's no military justification, and therefore it's an intentional targeting of civilians if I have absolutely no information from the other side about this? Like, isn't that like an unreasonably strong statement to make?
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think necessarily, no. I think the report is supposed to, it's a data compilation, absent any influence from Israel, the U.S., or anyone.
Well, not absent
they did
from anyone.
ask for
it's all statements from Palestinians and Hamas, right?
And independently researched through the UN and other organizations.
But the only information they were going by were the attacks on the ground and then statements from Palestinians and Hamas, right?
Didn't the report cite statements from IDF?
Statements that Palestinians said the IDF said. Hearsay, right?
Can you just link what you're talking? I'm not disputing it. I wasn't sure what.
Well, I think if we go back to the Goldstone report, does it not say near the top that Israel didn't participate in?
Yeah, let me see.
I don't have it up right now, but also I've got like 5 minutes. I have to go fucking shower and leave soon. But I'm just saying that, like, I can understand Israel not wanting to participate, but I could still understand people wanting to do a report. But I think it's pretty important to say that, like, obviously, like, every single strike that kills civilians is going to look like a literal war crime if you have no access to the intelligence on the other side, right? Every single strike is going to look unhinged. Like, there's no way to even know that.
I mean, only if you assume everybody on the ground will lie, right?
Exactly.
Well, no, wait. But the assumption made in the report is that every single attack on a civilian population that didn't have a clear military target on the ground was a war crime. That's the assumption made in the report.
Sure, but they're also looking at, like, if one of those instances had a firefight, right, had some Hamas people shooting at some Israeli people, and then a bunch of civilians died near the Hamas people, that's something you might discover, and that would undermine.
Sure, to get rid of some things, sure. So maybe not every single incident looks bad, but still on all of the other ones, and all the other attacks, it's literally just going by statements made by Palestinians and Hamas, and then that's it.
Yeah. Can you just say, like, a few words of the section you're looking at, just so I can see, because this is super long.
Well, here, this is somebody linked me. This is like 500 pages. It's like a collection of essays that were written, challenging parts of the Goldstone report. I'm sorry.
Okay. NGO Monitor. What is this NGO Monitor? Like, what is this from?
It sounds like what it's making. Hold on.
Like, who? what group?
So
is this?
I think you should read the intro and then look into the methodology and see if you have issues with that. I don't believe that the report says every single bomb that was dropped was intended to land on a civilian.
Well, sure, but I think the issue that they're giving here is actually central to what we were discussing before. It sounds like the issue that some of these writers here, and you can go for the publications. I think it tells you on each of the essays. It's telling you under Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, when you scroll down, you can see who's the writer of each of the essays that are provided in here, basically. And then you can look up those individual authors if you want.
So from the intro, that says the mission repeatedly sought to obtain the cooperation of the government of Israel. After numerous attempts had failed, the mission sought and obtained the assistance of the government of Egypt to enable it to enter the Gaza Strip through the Rafah crossing. The mission has enjoyed the support and cooperation of the Palestinian Authority and of the Permanent Observer Mission of Palestine to the United Nations. Due to the lack of cooperation from the Israeli government, the mission was unable to meet members of unable to meet members. Fuck me. Hold on. Members of the Gaza authorities and members of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. The mission did, however, meet officials of the Palestinian Authority, including a cabinet minister in Amman. During its visits to Gaza Strip, the mission held meetings with senior members of the Gaza authorities, and they extended their full cooperation and support of the mission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. So this is central to what we were talking about before. The mens rea, right? The criminal mind, the act for the things we're talking about. How could you possibly ascertain whether an attack on a civilian population was even a war crime without knowing the justification that Israel had for making the attacks?
If that's the case, obviously that would severely weaken the
Right.
Well,
so
but
that's where we got to look into.
But
Yeah,
just
sure.
to-
I mean,
just
it's
to
Well,
note-
that's what Lycan just read from the Goldstone report. There was no input here from any of the IDF military sources. So how could you possibly know that they're intentionally targeting civilians with no military justification? How do you have the mens rea for a war crime there without knowing what the military justification was prior to the attack?
and could you put in just like the line number or page number or something for that, just so I can read it?
that's all. That's all page like right from the beginning.
Okay.
Page 13, line whatever. Like, I mean, Steven, will you just read the rest of the intro from line 1?
Wait, on the Goldstone report?
Yep.
Like
Page
again, real quick.
13. Yep.
Can we conclude the same in the Ukraine-Russia war as well? To some extent, yes. I thought that was why, and I go back to this example because it was the one I remember reading the most about, was there was a time when Russia was targeting civilian infrastructure like power plants and stuff, and I think Zelensky was complaining, bro, this is war crimes. You're like leaving entire cities like on fucking power. This is bullshit. But I don't believe the UN or the United States like declared any of these as war crimes because there is like Russia can arguably justify the attacking of that type of infrastructure. I believe that was the case. So I can go back and fact check me on that if I'm wrong.
So from this, there's the intro methodology. It's 3 pages if you want to read it now. But I mean, I think that's going to be pretty pertinent to whether or not you like want to just discredit the claim overall. Obviously not entirely, because you still would have to look at the evidence provided for each, but it's an important part.
Yeah. So it might be
so which part here do you want me to?
Page 13, executive summary.
Control F, executive summary.
It's just an important part to see if your questions are answered.
The mission repeatedly sought to obtain the cooperation of the government of Israel after numerous attempts had failed. I'm just reading what you read. The mission sought and obtained the assistance of the government of Egypt to enable to enter the Gaza Strip through the Rafah crossing. The mission has enjoyed the support and cooperation of the Palestinian Authority and of the Permanent Observer Mission of Palestine to the United Nations. Due to the lack of cooperation from the Israeli government, the mission was unable to meet members of the Palestinian Authority of the West Bank. The mission did, however, meet officials of the Palestinian Authority, including a cabinet minister in Amman. During its visits to the Gaza Strip, the mission held meetings with senior members of the Gaza authorities, and they extended their full cooperation and support to the mission. I believe that would be Hamas or the Gaza authorities, correct? Subsequent to the public hearings in Geneva, the mission was informed that a Palestinian participant, Mr. Mohammed Sroor, had been detained by Israeli security forces and returned to the West Bank. It became concerned his detention may have been a consequence of appearance before the mission. The mission is in contact and continues to monitor developments. Okay. Yeah, so I feel like that's a little bit not the best, but
You didn't read the whole thing.
wait, read what else?
I mean, the whole intro and the whole methodology.
I was reading through some of the methodology, but I don't know if this is I don't
Well,
know if any of this
I
is
guess-
projecting any of what I said before.
Well, then we can discuss further. I just
Because
say
we have, like, on 18, the mission adopted an inclusive approach to gathering information and seeking views. Information gathering methods included the reviews of reports from different sources, interviews with victims, witnesses, and other persons having relevant information, site visits to specific locations in Gaza where the incidents had occurred, the analysis of video and photographic images, the review of medical reports about injuries, the forensic analysis of weapons and ammunition remnants collected at incident, meetings with a variety of interlocutors, invitations to provide information relating to the mission. Why is that? Yeah.
All right. Well,
yeah.
my last thought is I highly recommend you read this as much as you can. I'd say in its entirety. We've got a long time between now and the 21st and when you'll be back. So when you have free time on the plane, please read it all before you read criticisms. That way you're unbiased and you're going off of what is provided here. And then you can dig into criticisms and we can chat about it more. But I think you got to go through this to really levy criticism at it.
And just a quick
So
note.
I have to read a 450-page report, then I have to read the 326-page criticism in order to criticize the report that you haven't read.
I don't know. I've read a lot of this report. I've read at least 100 pages of this report. So, yeah, you got to read a lot.
Just a note about the criticism. The person with the foreword, that's Ambassador Dorgold. He was Ariel Sharon's and then Netanyahu's like right-hand man. So not saying that he's biased, so he's wrong, or whatever he's saying is like automatically not true, but just
Sure. Although that's just the forward, right? That's not the actual. Yeah.
But I think it said something about like where it's coming from, in terms of.
Well, obviously, it's coming from to fight against the Goldstone report. That's literally the name of this collection of essays. Is the Goldstone report reconsidered a critical analysis? So obviously, all of these people are going to be arguing on the pro-Israeli side. But I do find it pretty wild that there are, because one of the essays I was reading makes the justification or makes the argument that for you to have the mens rea of committing the war crime of the intentional murdering of civilians, you have to know the thought process behind the strikes. So to claim that there is a mens rea to claim that there was the mens rea requirement met in order to say that a war crime had been committed, how could you possibly have that without knowing any of the military intelligence behind the attack itself?
Well,
which I don't know what
So they talk about that in the Goldstone report, like line 25 of the foreword, where they talk about the ability to ascertain whether acts in question were done deliberately or recklessly. So looking at like corroborating different reports, witnesses, whether they seem reliable, whether like different events coincide, physical facts, that might be like really in the weeds of exactly how you. It's kind of detective work, I guess. It does seem a little bit.
Well, hold on. So I'm reading 25. You said on this basis. Also, there's a lot of kind of, I don't want to say weasel words because I know some of these are phrased pretty carefully, but on this basis, the mission has, to the best of its ability, determined what facts have been established. In many cases, it's found that acts entailing individual criminal responsibility have been committed. In all these cases, the mission has found that there is sufficient information to establish the objective elements of the crimes in question. In almost all the cases, the mission has been able to determine whether or not it appears that the acts in question were done deliberately or recklessly, or in the knowledge that the consequence that resulted would result in the ordinary course of events. The mission is thus referred in many cases to the relevant fault element, mens rea. The mission fully appreciates the importance of the presumption of innocence. The findings in this report do not subvert the operation of that principle. The findings do not attempt to identify the individuals responsible for the commission or offenses, nor do they pretend to reach the standard of proof applicable in criminal trials. It's just interesting how you could determine that without having any of the story from the side that you're accusing of committing the war crimes.
Well, I am going to not give you homework I won't do myself. So I'm going to read it. We'll both read it. I'll finish it off. In fact, I'll just start from the beginning again, read everything over, and any contentions you find, feel free to message me. We'll go over it again next time we chat.
Okay.
You're going to read a
good.
report that was basically like where big parts of it were retracted by the author.
Well, by
only-
by
That's
one
what
of
we're
the
doing.
authors, and not with
one of the authors.
not with substantive like new evidence, or at least not published. I mean, I think this is one of my issues when it comes to the way Israel operates with these things, that it's like there's always this, okay, well, maybe they had some good military justification, but it's never given as some kind of evidence. So when they
wait, hold on. Israel is much more open with this than any of the surrounding states, and especially
that's
Hamas
accurate.
when it comes to justifying it, right? That's one of the only
better
reasons
than
why
Hamas,
we
but we
criticize
give
it.
military funding to Israel. So this is part of what I'm talking about. What the standard should be for how we interact with them. Right.
Sure.
So obviously
Also,
they're a
also,
million
I
times
don't
better
think
than
also
Hamas.
then. So if we go all the way to the beginning of this, if that one guy, if Goldstone,
Goldstone.
if he
Yep.
did,
Gonna say
if he
Goldstein.
did retract some of his statements because of the Israeli version coming out with more evidence included, wouldn't that make sense? Wouldn't we expect him to do that?
Well, there wasn't. As far as I understand it, there wasn't like a new version where they were like, okay, finally we'll contribute to the report.
Well,
They
wait,
just
that's
like
my understanding is there was. Hold on, I just got linked to this. The report
Okay.
of the Committee of
Let's see.
Independent Experts in International Military and Human Rights
What's this?
Law to monitor and assess any domestic, legal, other proceedings. Advanced edited version. This is from 2010.
2010. Okay, that's interesting.
This report is submitted to the Human Rights Council pursuant to its Resolution 13.9. The committee received numerous reports. Blah, blah, blah. The committee. That's my understanding is that that's what this is. Someone in chat.
This
with
is related to this is like an update of the Goldstone report? Is
By
that
its resolution of 13.9, the Human Rights Council decided in the context of the follow-up to the report of the International Independent Fact-Finding Mission, hereinafter FFM report, to establish a committee of independent experts in June 20th, the High Commissioner for Human Rights announced the appointment of Mr. Yeah, somebody in chat linked this and said that this is the like an updated or another version that had Israeli input.
Okay. Well, if that's what this is, that would be like really important to read, obviously, because that gives the other side. But I don't like the idea that Israel can just not contribute to a report and then we basically just ignore the report. Obviously, we have to take it with
Yeah, for
a
sure.
mountain
But
of
that,
salt,
but then the yeah, I agree that that's bad. But then the language in the report probably needs to
Wait, hold on,
reflect-
hold on.
What?
Paragraph 42. 42. Ba-bum. The
think
committee
when I-
welcomes certain positive steps that have resulted from Israel's investigations into complaints raised in relation to the Gaza conflict. The adoption of new written procedures for the protection of civilians in urban warfare should help increase that protection in armed conflict and ensure that IDF places more emphasis on civilian safety. The establishment of a, quote, humanitarian officer, end quote, for every fighting battalion with responsibility for handling the civilian population should be highlighted as an innovative means to educate soldiers and advise commanders on the protection of civilians and civilian property and the planning and coordination of human assistance. Likewise, the new order regulation regulating the destruction of private property for military purposes should help to minimize such destruction in the future. The establishment of a clear doctrine, strict orders on the use of munitions containing white phosphorus is a step forward. In addition, blah, 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 all saying great shit about certain changes. But then 43 says, in spite of the many investigations undertaken and the sophisticated nature of Israel's military justice system, the committee has concerns about the investigations conducted into the conflict thus far. As a result of the lack of, let's see which one it is. Hold on. It's, let's see, go down to 55. It says, one way to dispel the suspicion of a lack of impartiality is to examine the results of the investigation of the 36 incidents of the FFM report. The committee notes the following findings: no violation or discontinuation of proceedings for various reasons, unclear results, disciplinary action taken, indictments, ongoing criminal investigations. Although the committee does not have access to the full evidence and reasoning behind the decision, given the seriousness of the allegations, the military investigations thus far appear to have produced very little.
Okay, what was the point of this?
The point is that it's saying, good job making these changes you guys have publicly made in your military to do, better human rights wise, but otherwise your investigations don't seem to have really shown anything as far as disproving these claims, I believe is what it's saying. But I will read this one too.
Hold on, wait, real quick. That's not what that's saying. This is saying that the military investigations so far don't appear to have produced. Wait. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding. One second. One way to dispel any lack of impartiality is to examine the results of the investigations of the 36 incidents. The committee notes the following findings: no violation, discontinued proceedings. Okay, 3. So, is the ongoing and criminal investigations for 5 different things?
Mm-hmm.
Although the committee does not have access to the full evidence and reasoning behind the decisions, given the seriousness of the allegations, the military investigations thus far have produced very little. So for these 5 military investigations, seems like it's talking about, yeah, there haven't been like public indictments yet, as of when this was published in 2010. I don't know what the status is now, but that just means, it could mean that the Israeli government is trying to hide it, but it could also just mean that the investigations are still ongoing, right?
Right. But I'm not seeing anything that's an update saying, hey, nothing was found that discredits the Goldstone report.
Well, sure, but we haven't read any of it, right? Or I haven't read this yet.
Well, we shall read.
Yeah, I need to go, guys. Take care.
All right, love you. Peace out. Okay,
Bye.
be careful, guys. Stay safe.
Bye,
All right,
folks.
take care. Bye.
Bye.